Mr. Sergeant of Arms, invite the members into the chamber and close the doors. I hereby declare the House of Representatives of the 113th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee now in session. Will the members please stand? Will the visitors in the gallery please stand and remain standing through the Pledge of Allegiance? Representative Davis will introduce the chaplain of the day. Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honored this morning to have Bill Geisel serve as our chaplain of the day. Many of you know that he has served our legislature for over 8 years. He's served 25 years in local churches, and Reverend Bill Geisel has been among us for 8. He served as voluntary chaplain and state minister for Tennessee with a nationwide ministry called the Capital Commission. He counts it a joy and a privilege to serve all members and staff of the Senate and the House, regardless of party affiliation or denomination. While working on his undergraduate degree, he began his ministry journey in Chattanooga at Tennessee Temple University in public relations and student affairs, while serving at the Highland Park Baptist Church and as a youth pastor in Georgia. He's also served congregations in Tennessee, Michigan, Indiana, South Carolina, as well as Ontario, Canada. In addition, he's traveled extensively in the Middle East, guiding in-depth study tours to Israel and other biblical lands. He and his wife, Cynthia, have been married 35 years and have 4 sons and 2 grandsons. And I'm incredibly grateful that there wasn't a 5-syllable word in that. But I would like to say, because Mr. Geisel was one of the very first people that I met up here. And he invited me to come to Capital Commission. And it's absolutely been a blessing for me. It's also been a blessing, I know, for our legislature as well. And one of the verses that comes to mind when I think of him is Proverbs 27:17. It's iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And one of the things that is so prevalent is that iron can be sharpened into a tool or it can be sharpened into a weapon. And our chaplain is an absolute tool to help us, to guide us in our heart, in our thoughts, in our words, and in our deeds. And so with that, I'd like to ask Reverend Geisel. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I've kind of walked alongside you through this journey, this session, and over the last 8 years. So it's a different view for me because I know you. And so as I've been asked to be here this morning, been thinking much and praying much what verse of scripture I'd leave with you before I pray. And God brought this to my mind. I'm going to read the verse for you. Is just the first half of this verse. Deuteronomy 33:27 says, "The eternal God is thy refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms." I know you're tired. I did not think the second part of the verse was really applicable, but I'll let you know what it is. "And he shall thrust out the enemy from before thee, and shall say, destroy them." Didn't think that really was a good part this morning. So we'll focus on that first part, because really that is the point. It's the reality that you're fatigued, tired, you've been laboring diligently and hard, all of you. And my prayer is that God will sustain you and that you'll turn to him as he does. Let's pray. Our Father and the ruler of the universe, you are in control. You're in control when we do not feel in control. You are in control when there's challenge and difficulty and hardship. There is nothing that catches you off guard. Nothing ever dawns on you. You are never unaware. And that's not only of us as individuals, but of our families and of the activity that happens on this hill and every person across this state and nation. And so, Father, we turn to you as our refuge, our hope. And the work that has to be done here on this hill is an incredibly important work. As a rabbi friend said to me once, our task is to build a home that we build together. So I pray that you would give wisdom, give grace, give fortitude, and may the work that is completed this week be a reminder that the work is never done. This session won't end. There's still more to do. So may you give them wisdom to know how to do it in a way that they can collaborate and work together in the days ahead. We pray your blessing on this assembly today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Representative Davis will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Clerk, please take roll.
Roll call.
Mr. Clerk, please take the roll.
Mr. Speaker, 93 members present.
Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Welcoming and honoring.
Welcome and honoring Representative Mitchell. You're recognized in the well.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the Sergeant of Arms could bring in our guest.
Mr. Sergeant at Arms, please escort the guests to the well. Representative Mitchell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sometimes when you're in the well and you're giving a presentation, the person you're presenting to feels the most honored, but I think today I'm the most honored. This gentleman has been the playlist of my life. This is an honor for me to honor Steve Earle today. Earlier this session, we named Copperhead Road one of our state songs. Steve's been playing music. He released his first album in 1982. So it's over 40 years he's been bringing joy to many Tennesseans. And it's a tremendous honor to have someone like Steve on this floor today, bringing forth here at the end of session. I think Chair Lady Hazelwood said we probably need a little music to begin our day today to calm everything down. But it's with great honor that we have Steve Earle today. And Mr. Speaker, if with your permission, I'd like Steve to say a few words.
Yes, sir.
You can speak if you want to play the song.
My roots in Tennessee are pretty deep at this point. I hitchhiked here from Texas when I was 19 years old, and to do this, to write songs, to learn how to do it, and I learned what I do here. My mother was born here, and she's back in the state. My sister lives here, and my brother lives here, and I'm still here a lot. I have a house in Fairview that seems to be divorce-proof, and this is to write something that you feel like is going to be around after you're gone. That's all any songwriter wants to do, and maybe this will help that happen. So, and I also wanted to see what a mandolin sounded like in here. My name's John Lee Pettimore, same as my daddy's daddy before. Hardly ever saw granddaddy down here. Only come to town about twice a year. Buy 100 pounds of yeast and some copper and lime. Everybody knew it made moonshine. Now the revenue man wanted granddaddy bad, headed up a holler with everything he had. It's for my time, well, I've been told, never come back from Copperhead Road. Now daddy run the whiskey in a big black Dodge. Bought it at an auction at the Mason's Lodge. Johnson County Sheriff painted on the side. Shot a coat of primer, then looked inside. Well, him and my uncle tore that engine down. I still remember that rumbling sound. And then the sheriff come around the middle of the night, heard mama crying that something wasn't right. Headed down to Nassau with a weekly load, smell of whiskey burning down Copperhead Road. Volunteered for the army on my birthday. Draft white trash first round here and away. Done 2 tours of duty in Vietnam. I come home with a brand new plan. I take seed from Colombia and Mexico. Plant her up a holler down Copperhead Road. Now the D-head got a chopper in the hair. Wake up screaming like I'm back over there. Learn a thing or two from Charlie, don't you know? Better stay away from Copperhead Road. Copperhead Road. Copperhead Road. Copperhead Road. Thank you so much. I want to thank everybody that made this possible, but I want to remind you, there's another song on the Copperhead Road album you ought to check out. It's called The Devil's Right Hand.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, Speaker, if you wouldn't mind coming down for a picture.
Representative Powers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that the Sergeant of Arms escort our guest into the chamber.
Mr. Sergeant of Arms, escort the guests to the well. Representative Powers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I request that the clerk read the resolution only one time, please.
Mr. Clerk, read the resolution.
House Joint Resolution 544 by Chairman Powers. A resolution to honor the Roane State Community College Raiders basketball team on winning the TCCAA NJCAA Region 7 championship and making the school's second appearance in the NJCAA Division I men's basketball championship. Whereas the members of this General Assembly are pleased to recognize the team of remarkable young men who selflessly united behind their strings to attain the very pinnacle of collegiate basketball. And whereas the members of the 2022-2023 Roane State Community College men's basketball team elevated themselves to elite status in college basketball by posting an overall record of 23-9 and winning back-to-back Region 7 championships. And whereas the conference championship earned the Raiders their second National Junior College Athletic Association tournament berth in school history, generating great excitement in the Roane State community. And whereas proudly representing Roane State Community College and the state of Tennessee at the Hutchinson Sports Arena in Hutchinson, Kansas, the Raiders valiantly staged a second half comeback, closing a 22-point deficit to just 3 points, coming just short of achieving their first tournament victory. And whereas the magical season was made possible by the leadership, acumen, and instruction of Coach Alan Holt, who in just his second year at the helm of this program was recognized as Coach of the Year for the Appalachian District for the second consecutive year. And whereas the Roane State Raiders enjoyed a historic season, and they should be commended as they hoist their Region 7 championship banner. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 113th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the Senate concurring, that we honor the Roane State Community College Raiders basketball team on winning the 2023 District 7 championship. Congratulate the coaches and players on making the school's second appearance in the NJCAA men's basketball championship, and extend to them our best wishes for much continued success next season.
Representative Powers, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm joined by my colleagues up here that represent the Roane State Community College service area, as our speaker does in Cumberland County. And so the first person, this is just a great honor to have them up here 2 years in a row. They won the state championship and gone to the nationals. So we're really honored to have them up here. Unfortunately, a lot of the players couldn't be here because they'd already gone home for the year and taking online classes. But we do have with us, first of all, I'd like to recognize the president of Roane State, Mr. Chris Whaley. Dr. Whaley, would you care to come and say a few words, please?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Powers, and to the whole Roane State delegation. It's truly our honor to be here today on behalf of, again, the Roane State players, many of whom, as you say, have already gone home, or some of them are working hard on projects and tests, and that's where we want them to be today. But I do have with me our athletic director, David Lane, and the coach of the Raiders, the man who made it all possible this season and last season, Coach Alan Holt. And so I'm grateful to have them with us. Grateful for the heart of this Roane State team, who showed time after time after time that they just never give up, which is at the heart, we think, of what Roane State means and all of higher education, in fact. And so we appreciate being here. And I do want to thank all of you, not only the Roane State delegation, but all the members of the House for the difference that you make in the lives of students, not only at Roane State Community College, but throughout all of higher education in Tennessee. Through your support of programs like Promise and Reconnect, support of Middle College, you all make a difference every day. So never doubt the difference that you make. I'll get a chance to shake hands of hundreds of graduates in about 2 weeks because all of you made a pathway open to them to higher education. Very grateful to all of you and great to be here. I don't know if I should say this, Representative Powers, since it's not official yet, but we do want to congratulate, even though it's bittersweet, your dear sweet wife, Tracy Powers, who's retiring from Roane State this year, who is the leader of our Campbell County campus. Those are shoes that can never be filled. Sir, we are grateful to her. We are grateful to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Representative
Thank you
Powers.
so Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, thank you so much. I'm still trying to talk her out of that, but I appreciate that. I think everybody in here knows my lovely wife, and I appreciate that. Next, Athletic Director David Lane, would you like to come up and say a couple words, please?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's an honor and privilege for all of us to be here this morning. And the opportunity and just the experiences that I get to have working with Dr. Chris Whaley and also with Coach Holt and all of our athletic staff. For me, it's an opportunity to work with a fine group of young men, young women, and also our student athletes. So a lot of things, many things that happen here on the Hill directly impact the day in and day out opportunities and successes that our student athletes get to enjoy. So thank you, Representative Powers, also and our delegates from our area, which we would not be able to do what we do and enjoy the blessings of working with our young people without all of the help that comes here. So thank you very much.
Representative Powers.
Thank you. And at this time, I'd like to have the coach, Alan Holt, come up. Is Representative Hastings in the building? Kirk Hastings? Yeah, we've got a new recruit for you next year, Coach, right back here in the back, if you'll look. And Coach Holt, would you come up and say a couple of words, please?
You're recognized.
It's an honor and privilege to be here today. Thank you all for having us. Again, kind of piggybacking off what they said, we wouldn't be able to do what we do in our program without the help and support of everyone here. The immense amount of lives that we get to change is probably the most important thing involved in our process. So without that support and guidance, we would really be at a loss. So thank you all for everything you do and for allowing us to have a great school in Roane State and a great program. Thank you.
Representative Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Any other colleagues that would like to make remarks that are up here today? Anyone? Representative? Okay. At this time, Mr. Speaker, would you care to come down and join us in the well for a photo?
Welcome and honoring Representative Moon. You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to honor my best friend. Happy birthday, Debbie Bradford Moon. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like everyone to rise. I'd like you to rise in honor of all of our spouses that get left home every week as we come here to do the people's business. But more importantly, I'd like you to meet my husband who has Oh, why me, Lord? Speaker, could you move me next year? No, I'd like you to welcome my husband. We've been married 33 years tomorrow. I could not do what I do without his love and support. Thank you.
Representative Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to welcome a constituent and Smith County GPO Chair, Mr. Mike Dunn, up in the gallery here with us today. Thank you.
Representative Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm sad to report to you about a horrific crash yesterday in the I-65 construction zone on exit 117 near Orlinda. This is an area where, because of construction, there is need to slow down, and that has not happened despite Representative Garrett and Representative Paul and I having mentioned it, that speeding is so bad there. Now this car, traffic was at a standstill, and this vehicle was stationary, and two semi-trailer trucks rammed into the back of him. There are two semi-trailer trucks in front of him. So this 28-year-old Tennessean resident of our area had no chance. He's father of two. And I also want to thank Pastor Mark Carroll, who has called and warned me again and again, as well as he's called Representative Garrett, that this is an area where increased highway presence and TDOT cautions are needed, whether we need more lights there, more cautionary signs that people need to slow down. This is the third death within the last year in this area of I-65 construction. I appeal to our departments to do better, and kindly join me for a moment of silence for this 28-year-old whose name is Brian Friedel. Thank you. Thank you, members. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I'm sure we all have groups back home that are very honest and open with their opinions of us. We're thankful to have them as supporters, but they're quick to criticize us when we don't do what they'd like us to do. I'm happy to have one of those groups with me today up in the balcony above the board. If y'all will stand up, Dixon County Patriots are here with me today. Y'all make them welcome.
Representative Pearson.
Thanks, Speaker. Just some folks that I know from our district who are now joining our processions consistently, including my own mom, just saying hi, and thank you for sticking it out for the length of this session to see how our government's operating.
Representative Carringer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to take just a moment to remember one of our great Knox County elected officials who has passed away. This is Joy McCroskey, who was our former Knox County Criminal Court clerk, worked in the office from I think from the time she was barely out of high school or college, and went on and became our Knox County Criminal Court clerk. And so I would like for us to take a moment, remember her family during this time. Thank you all.
Thank you. Representative Jernigan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to recognize and honor my intern this year, John Bernardo, who did a wonderful job. I hope he continues in public policy in the future, because I think it's bright. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Representative Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A couple things this morning. If you will, help me welcome our friends from the Good Spring Mennonite School from Giles County up here in the balcony. We're glad to have them today with us. And also, Mr. Speaker, help me honor a great friend, mentor, teacher, coach, Mr. Micah Landers, who has spent numerous years at Richland High School, where I graduated. He announced yesterday his retirement, And so if you will help me honor him and wish him well in his retirement. Thank you.
Representative Glenn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to recognize my intern, Taylor Ray, who is from Austin P. She will be going on to graduate here in a couple of weeks in political science. And her dream job is to come back to the Capitol and work. So if you need you got a job for her, she's looking for it.
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was just out in the rotunda talking to some of the students who've been here consistently week after week after week, calling on this body to pass common sense gun laws. I think that it would be a betrayal of these young people and these parents who've been out here if we leave here without acting. And so I want to lift up their call to the governor to call a special session on common sense gun laws. I hope that we can stand with these young people and parents and do the right thing and do our job before going to start summer vacations. Thank you.
Representative Parkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a couple things. I want to recognize my intern, Shania Sutton, who's watching. And I want to tell her what a great job she's done, what a blessing to the office she's been. Also, I want to recognize the new members of the Seersucker Caucus that made it today. And we look forward to more dialogue with you later on after session. Thanks.
Representative Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to welcome my page from a week ago, Hannah Kate McFadden. She's up in the balcony. And I want to remind everybody that she is here encouraging all of us to sign her candidate pledge, asking for civility in both elected office and in our campaigns. And I really encourage you to take an opportunity to speak with her. She's a really sharp young lady. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise also this morning. I wish it was under more pleasant circumstances, but there was a young man that worked here by the name of Theron Lacey. Many of y'all may remember him, may not. He worked down in the supply shop when you go and we get our calendars, et cetera, our pens, da-da-da-da-da. Unfortunately, the other day, he was on a tri-wheeler in the city somewhere and with his child, mind you, and some kind of way the vehicle flipped and it killed him, barely sparing his child. And if you know Theron, he was just a sweet young man, probably about 42 now, but he'd been here. I met him a long time ago. He kept us well supplied, great attitude, just a beautiful person. So that family now is left without a father. We pray God encircles that family and help to assist that kid on into adulthood because he just had some young children. A moment of silent prayer, if you don't mind. Amen. Thank you.
Representative Hemmer.
Hope everyone, thank you, Mr. Speaker, but hope everyone can wish Anne Marie Sherman a very happy birthday today. She said to make sure everyone reached out and sang her happy birthday. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome and honoring. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to resolutions.
Lear Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that all resolutions properly filed be introduced pursuant to rule number 17 and placed on the consent calendar, referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate Joint Resolutions congratulatory memorializing.
Lear Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all Senate joint resolutions congratulatory memorializing on that be placed on the consent calendar pursuant to rule number 17.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Resolutions lying over.
Lear Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that all resolutions lying over be referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Introduction to bills, Senate bills on first consideration.
Lear Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that Senate bills 195, 355, 360, 626, and 867 transmitted by the Senate be held on the desk pending third consideration of their companion House bills.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Senate bills on second consideration, House bills on second consideration.
Lear Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move that House bills 1,581 and 1,582 be passed on second consideration to be held on the desk or referred to the appropriate standing committee.
Without objection, so ordered. Next order, Mr. Clerk.
Petitions and memorials, reports from standing committees, reports from select committees, calendars. Mr. Speaker, the House has a consent calendar.
Chairman Zachary, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker, I move passage of the consent calendar on third and final consideration in keeping with Rule 50.
Gentleman moves passage of the consent calendar, properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, any objections been filed?
Mr. Speaker, no objections filed.
Anyone seeking recognition on the consent calendar? All right, we're voting on the consent. We are voting on the consent calendar. All members in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Powers aye. Barrett aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Having received the constitutional majority, I declare the consent calendar passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Lear Lambert, you're recognized. Well, next order, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the House has a regular calendar.
Lear Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I make a motion to take up House Regular Calendar 2 at this time.
Proper motion, probably second without objection. So ordered. Mr. Clerk, call first bill, please.
Mr. Speaker, for clarity, that's regular calendar 2 dated for Wednesday, April 19th. So on the dashboard, you'll need to go back to Wednesday. House Bill 1367 by Chairman Farmer, relative to opioids. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 637.
Chairman Farmer moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 637, proper second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this does, this allows for, we set up the opioid abatement fund last year, which allowed settlements to come in from certain manufacturers and distributors of these pills that cause a lot of problems for our state. This will allow for 6 new settlements to come in, which will account to about $490 million to be distributed across our state. And just ask for passage. I renew my motion.
Chairman Farmer moves passage of Senate Bill 637 on third and final consideration. Properly seconded. Ms. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Civil Justice Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Russell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as Senate amendment. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've removed my motion.
Chairman Farmer renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 637 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Senate Bill 637 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider is tabled. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1366 by Chairman Farmer and others, relative to criminal law. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 814.
Chairman Farmer moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 814, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Chairman Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this bill does, it allows for folks coming out of prison to have the documents they need to get a driver's license, to be gainfully employed. So it will allow our prisons to give, as folks leave prison, they'd have their social security card, they'd have their birth certificate, and those documents they need to help them out as they come back into society, hopefully to be good, productive citizens. And I renew my motion.
Chairman Farmer moves passage of Senate Bill 814 on third and final consideration. By second, Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Keesling, you're recognized.
Amendment, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Amendment 1 is the same as the Senate amendment. We move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
I renew my motion.
Chairman Farmer renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 814 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Capley, aye. Warner, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
Senate Bill 814, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1365 by Chairman Farmer, relative to background checks. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1038 on third and final consideration. Excuse me, I retract that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1038.
Chairman Farmer moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 1038, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Chairman Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1038 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Farmer moves passage of Senate Bill 1038 on third and final consideration. Bobby second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Keesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, the amendment number 1 is the same as the Senate amendment. We move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this bill does, it allows TBI to be in line with the FBI with regards to background checks and fingerprinting and such. So I just ask that I'd move for passage.
Chairman Farmer renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1038, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays.
Senate Bill 1038, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion reads series table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1358 by Chairman Farmer, relative to healthcare. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 698.
Chairman Farmer moves substitute and form Senate Bill 698, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 698 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Farmer moves passage of Senate Bill 698 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, it's the same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this bill does is brought to me by a constituent, and it's requiring our the Tennessee State Department of Health to urge the United States Department of Health to require testing for a rare genetic brain disease. It's a fairly simple procedure, but it just requires that. So that's what this bill does. I renew my motion.
Chairman Farmer renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 698, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. As every member casts a vote, does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
Senate Bill 698, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion reads series table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1270 by Chairman Farmer, relative to community corrections. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1274.
Chairman Farmer moves substitute and form Senate Bill 1274. Probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Farmer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1274 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Farmer moves passage of Senate Bill 1274 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Ms. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Keesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment is the same as the Senate amendment. Again, we move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Farmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, what this bill does, it allows for those jurisdictions that still have the ability to use community corrections as a probationary system, as opposed to state probation. It would codify and preserve those. So it just allows another mechanism to supervise folks that are on probation. And I think they do a wonderful job, and I'd move for passage, and I renew my motion.
Chairman Farmer renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Leader Lambert.
Mr. Speaker, I just didn't want to let the good chairman and my dear friend get away with 5 bills in a row without at least one question. Is it true that you very carefully crafted all of your bills through committee to make sure they all hit on the same calendar? And if so, props to you, sir.
Chairman Farmer.
Leader Lambert, I did. I had attempted to have 10 in a row, but Chairman Zachary threw me off and put some on consent. So, yes, sir. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Seeing none. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1274, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
Senate Bill 1274, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Motion reads series table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 328 by Leader Lamberth, relative to funds administered by state government entities.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 328 on third and final consideration.
Leader Lamberth moves passage. Following second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House State Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Keesling, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment does rewrite the bill. We'll defer to the leader for further explanation. We move to adopt.
Chairman Keesling moves adoption of amendment number 1. Probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this bill creates a framework where small communities can, if we ever wanted to, place money in a fund and get low interest revolving loans for emergency responder equipment. So fire trucks, police vehicles, firefighter vests, that type of thing. There's no money in the program currently. We didn't fund that in this budget, but it does create at least a structure so we could do so. We already do this for water, sewer, and some other things for small communities, but it expands it a bit for emergency responders. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Leader Lamberth renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Leader, would you explain to us some of the things that they could use the funds for?
Leader Lamberth.
The equipment includes for firefighters, it would be uniforms, fire engines, other vehicles, ladders, hooks, hoses, and other equipment necessary for containing and extinguishing fire. For law enforcement, it could be uniforms, vehicles, weapons, holsters, handcuffs, restraints, batons, protective gear, all other equipment necessary. For emergency medical, it could be uniforms, vehicles, stretchers, medical devices, medical supplies, first aid kits, defibrillators. For emergency communications, 911, it could be uniforms, radios, antennas, base stations, call boxes, and so on. I mean, it's really anything that a small community would need. And most of these small communities, many of us have small towns and counties with lower population in this room. They really don't have the tax base to be able to fully equip some of their emergency responders. And so this just gives them an option, again, through the Treasurer's office to have some low interest revolving loans.
Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You just answered my second question, loans versus grants.
All right. Any further discussion? Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker. Sponsor, I heard you mention batons and things like that. So when you're thinking about the money that could be used for law enforcement, it's entirely up to the discretion of those communities. So it could be some extreme weapons, or is there a list? I heard you reading a list of weapons and things that could be purchased using state dollars that all of our counties are paying into.
Leader Lambert.
If you look at the amendment that was filed with the bill and that is in there, and if you look under specifically subpart, it's under subsection, it's 4-31-503. And if you look down, there's a list contained within there. That list is somewhat inclusive of all the equipment that would normally be issued to a firefighter, a police officer, or someone with EMS. So it's not a complete list. It is up to the locals as to what they would need to outfit them with. But the intention is that it's their decision as to kind of what a police officer needs. For instance, I don't think listed in here is every piece of equipment, but it is at least somewhat of a list of saying, look, our intention is if you're hiring a police officer, a firefighter, EMS, dispatcher, that this loan could be used to outfit that individual to serve their community.
Representative Pearson.
Okay, I got it.
Representative Doggett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and the sponsor. This is an excellent bill, and I'm extremely appreciative that you're doing this as a representative of a community that has many rural fire departments. A lot of these fire departments have to rely heavily upon fundraising each year to help supplement what little bit of budget that they receive from their county commissions. Equipment is constantly evolving. Technology is changing, and so a lot of the tools that they're using, especially in extractions from motor vehicle accidents, things have changed, and a lot of times in a community such as mine, you may only have 1 or 2 stations out of a 10-station county that has these extraction tools. And now that they're using battery-powered options and things like that, they can get multiple uses out of these tools, but the issue is they cost money. And so giving them an opportunity to explore other options to help finance some of these things it's a great asset to our communities, and I just want to say thank you for bringing this bill.
Leader Lambert, anything? No, sir. Representative Hardaway.
Thank you, Speaker and sponsor. Sorry I didn't get a chance to speak to you earlier. Do these loans, the equipment and the training, does any of this speak to the citizens who are going through mental health crises?
Leader Lambert. Leader Lambert.
So this deals with equipping, again, police officers, firefighters, EMS, dispatchers. All of those folks interact with individuals sometimes that are going through mental health crisis on a regular basis. And so this is the structure that is needed for virtually every other program out there. If you have a small community that can't afford a police car and the equipment for a police officer to be able to use, then it's pretty difficult and almost impossible for them to be able to deal with any of the mental health crisis issues that might come up in their community.
Representative Hardaway.
And what, in your intent, is it, do you intend for them to use these bonds, these low-interest loans, to further the care for mental health citizens that they respond to?
Leader Lamberth.
Again, these are specifically loans for them to be able to, utilize these funds to benefit their community by outfitting these emergency responders that will use it to serve all of their citizens.
Representative Hardaway.
Yes, sir, and I understand that, but I'm trying to get you to advocate for the citizens who are going to need mental health care, that tender care, as opposed to a violent response from law enforcement, that we have to consider their needs also, including, even if this does not include training, there's equipment that we need to equip our first responders with. And I'm sure you want that equipment to be part of what's eligible under this bill.
Leader Lamberth.
It would include all equipment that would be needed to serve the people of our communities, especially these smaller communities, be they in mental health crisis or if they were in a crash, as was referenced earlier, or anything else. And so it includes all equipment. There are many other bills that deal with some of the issues you're talking about, and I have supported virtually all of them. This one is literally just equipment and trying to get that base level there. We have small communities that have firefighters that have coats that they're wearing into fires to try to save people's lives that are years out of date. I mean, we have ambulances in some small communities that have items in that ambulance that would never be used in a large city because they're just out of date, but it's the best that they have. So this is an intent to try to really allow them with the revolving loan to have a low interest or no interest revolving loan so that they can get everything up to standard and their community can be safer.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. And you did respond at the beginning of that we're also concerned about making sure that we have adequate equipment, up-to-date equipment, medical or otherwise, for those who are going through a mental health crisis or something of that nature. So I thank you for that. Thank you.
Representative Sapicki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Leader Lambert, thank you for bringing this bill. The county that I represent is growing, one of the fastest in the country, and we are having trouble keeping up for our volunteer fire department to provide, like you said, the turnout coats, the breathing apparatuses to make sure that they have the necessary tools to do their job. So this is outstanding. And also as a county growing like we are, the emergency medical services, the ambulances, the staff, the things for those is highly important for our county to be able to use this bill as a resource so that we can protect and provide the services and the transportation for those that are going through a mental health crisis to get to the proper place for their help. So thank you for sponsoring this bill.
Chair Lady Hazelwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And while I would point out that Leader Lambert's bill is not funded at this point in time for our communities, we did fund in the budget a number of pools that would be available for volunteer fire departments, $10 million in that pool. We have money for EMS and rescue squads. So there are places that communities in Tennessee will be able to go to receive money for these kinds of equipment needs. And Mr. Speaker, I know I'm way out of order, but I also want to recognize my intern, Kathleen Keishel. It's up here to my right. She has done yeoman's work this year, working as an intern in the finance chair's office, brings a number of challenges, particularly over the last couple of weeks. So I want to just recognize her for her hard work and wish her well as she continues her studies at Belmont. And Kathleen, wherever you are, would you please stand up? She's done a fantastic job. Thank you.
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm definitely supportive of the provisions for our fire department and for our EMS personnel, but I am concerned about one provision, and that's that this money can be used by local law enforcement to purchase surplus military equipment under the Department of Defense 1033 Military Excess Property Program. Currently, more than $120 million worth of military surplus equipment is in the possession of local law enforcement in Tennessee, including mine-resistant vehicles, drones, tanks, militarized guns. And so I'm just really concerned about that we're going to be using this money to further militarize our police departments. Can you explain that to us, Representative Lambert, as to why we would need to grant loans to purchase more militarized equipment that does not keep our community safe and in fact erodes trust between the public and law enforcement?
Leader Lambert.
I think recently you made some comments about getting out into more of Tennessee to see some of the smaller communities. I would encourage you to do so. Come visit some of our smaller communities. Once you get out of the large city centers and you really visit the people of Tennessee, when you get out there in a small community that can't afford a vest for a firefighter or a standard piece of equipment, the radios that police officers need or 911 dispatch, what you're bringing up is a debate we can have on a different bill. That's not what this is. This is literally a bill to allow small communities, rural communities, to be able to have the basic equipment. What you're describing is what large police departments, what large cities, what others deal with. This is dealing with small communities.
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That was not an answer. And going to some of our counties, I've talked to people in your county, by the way, who are asking for you to resign, but I have went to other counties
That's out of order, Representative Jones. Okay, let me just be very clear today once again. You need to stay on the legislation. Quit making insults to members as you're asking them questions. Sir, Representative Jones, I'm just saying that's out of order. That was out of order. If you'd like to continue, this is your last chance. But I would refrain from making those comments about members and stick to the piece of legislation. Representative Jones.
Mr. Speaker, you did not rule out Lambert for making an attack saying that I need to go to rural counties, which had nothing to do with the question asked. But again, you inconsistently apply the rules. That is your purview.
Out of order. Next member, Representative Pearson, you're recognized.
I want to talk a little bit about this funding mechanism as it relates to the loans. Today, if a community needed resources for their fire, for police, for the purchasing of these types of weapons and things, how would they pay for it?
Leader Lambert.
Great question. And so for a lot of these communities, there's only a couple different options. So they can raise taxes exponentially on their citizens because they have a smaller number of citizens. And so any tax increase is going to be larger because there's less folks to spread it out across. And so that's obviously one option is they can drastically raise taxes, which is going to diminish their growth in their communities. Because if their property taxes go up a lot, then other businesses, homes, and everything else are really not going to come there. So it's not a good option for them, and is obviously to be avoided whenever possible. So the other option is you try to issue bonds. You try to go in the bond market. Well, again, these are small communities. They're just really not attractive as large communities are in the state when trying to go into the bond market. So the only other real option that they have is to try to get some sort of traditional loan, usually at much higher interest rates, because as obviously interest rates have gone up, and these small communities wind up paying out significantly more in interest. And that's really where this idea came from. I mean, several months ago, I was meeting with the treasurer and said, look, I asked the very question you just asked and said, what are the options for small communities? And so for water and sewer already, they can get these low interest to no interest revolving loans. And what I would envision this would be, hopefully at some point, is that we as a body would choose to put about $50 million of one-time funds into the structure of this, that they can then get really low interest or no interest loans. So they're going to be paying it back, but they don't have that hindrance of that increased cost just because they're a small community. Because the fire engine, the police car, the equipment's all going to cost the same amount of money for a small community as a large community. So it's just they're in a disadvantage just because they're little.
Nope. Leader Camper.
Hang on.
For- Representative Leader Lamberth, keep going, please.
Mr. Speaker, I was done with my answer, but I'll continue to brag on the bill if we can for a moment while everything else is handled. And I would say that I think in the next bill that I present, I'm going to ask Chairman Farmer to present because y'all seem to enjoy his bills much more than mine. So
Representative Pearson.
Yep. So I guess, somewhat of a concern that I have is also what happens if they don't pay the loan back? So that's a concern. But then I heard one of the representatives, I can't remember who it was, talking about how much growth they have in their community. And so if there's a lot of growth that is happening, it kind of goes against what you're saying in the communities that don't have a lot of growth for X, Y, or Z reason. He's saying that there is growth in their community, and all taxpayers are still going to be paying to give and subsidize them, increasing the resources for fire, and everyone supports that. But I am also concerned that they could be using these resources for the weaponization of their police force, and his community is growing. And so it could be a disparate impact still, that places that actually don't need the resources of all of us that we're contributing are getting the resources. And then if those communities still don't grow, if they don't have an increase in funding, how are they ever going to pay back these loans?
Leader Lamberth.
yes. And so this puts them on a schedule, and obviously that is all determined by the treasurer to make sure. Now, there's always an opportunity for default, and at the end of the day, I mean, that's why it's not funded at this point. I mean, there is some risk to the state here, because I mean, if we're loaning money to a small community and they are not, at some point something happens and they're not able to pay it back, then the taxpayers of this state would have some risk there, which is why right now there's not any money funded in this. This is a structure that we could, and then we can make the decision based on how much risk that we feel is there. But I have a large degree of trust in both the treasurer and the comptroller of being very careful, because remember, they do this now. They do it for water and sewer infrastructure, just not for first responders. And so there's a very low amount of risk here, but anytime somebody is loaning money, there's going to be some risk.
Representative Pearson.
I guess the funny thing is, how are you ensuring that the resources actually go to the places of most need, particularly as it relates to fire? Because again, the weaponization of police forces is not something that I can support. That's something that Representative Jones was mentioning, and I concur with that. When certain members have already said their communities are growing and doing fine, and they just need more money from us to help them to continue to grow, that doesn't sound like the people that this legislation would be intended to support.
Leader Lamberth.
So, and the other representative that mentioned that, so we have a lot of communities that are growing. And then, like, for instance, in Sumner County where I am, if you're in Hendersonville or Gallatin or even White House or Portland, the southern part of my county is growing pretty rapidly. But if you're up in Westmoreland, and look, the folks in Westmoreland are some of the best people you'd ever meet in the world. They're fantastic. They have a lot of pride in their community, but it's a long way from some of the city centers and some of the, factories and jobs and retail and everything else. It's in a county that's growing rapidly, but the city itself, it's a small town. And so you may have a county or an area that is doing well and has a lot of, funds available to them, but still have pockets there that would fall in this. And as far as what it's used for, again, it's very clearly for the basic tools of the trade for a police officer, a firefighter, EMS dispatcher. I understand the other argument, and we can get into that in other bills. This just isn't what this does. I mean, these are small loans. These are for folks to be able to just get the basic services. I understand the argument in the other. That debate's been out there for years. We're just talking basic services here.
Representative Towns.
Previous question.
Previous question's been called. Any objection? Seeing none. All those in favor of House Bill 328 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Campbell, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 97, no nays, 2 present, not voting.
House Bill 328, having received a constitutional majority, I declare it passed. I object to most reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1060 by Chairman Boyd, relative to employment.
Chairman Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1060 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Boyd moves passage following second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We move to withdraw in favor of the Finance, Ways and Means Committee
Without
amendment.
objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 2.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. We're going to do the same thing and move to withdraw this one as well.
Without objection, amendment number 2 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 3.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Sponsor. I move to adopt and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption of amendment number 3, properly seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 3 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, in the book of Matthew, chapter 9, verse 37, it says, "The harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few." And that kind of sums up our labor market in the state of Tennessee right now. As recent as February, we had about 117,000 unemployed Tennesseans, around 21,800 that are currently drawing unemployment, yet we have around 265,000 open jobs in the state. What House Bill 1060 seeks to do is to expand the list of activities that qualify as work search activities for purposes of state unemployment benefits. It requires people that are drawing unemployment to do 4 rather than 3 activities a week. And it addresses an issue that we see where folks will ghost an employer. They will apply for a job, use it as a means to continue drawing unemployment benefits, and then not show up for the job interview. It creates a mechanism where the employer can actually turn that over to the Department of Labor, and the claimant would lose the benefits for that week and that week only. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Boyd renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Pearson.
Yeah, I want to hear a little bit, thanks, Speaker. I want to hear more about the punitive nature of this, because we're talking about people who are unemployed, and then you say this bill is targeted at folks who are abusing the system in some way. And you know, as I know, there are a whole lot of tropes about people who abuse the systems of unemployment and a lot of other things who are really struggling, and then that trope is used to take away their benefits, and it's typically thinking about Black women. And so I'm really concerned about that being the framework in which we're operating. And so can you talk about why, again, just a little bit more in detail to the latter point you mentioned about them being reported, losing benefits, and how that's going to benefit us having more workers in the workforce?
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, it's not targeting anyone. You know, unemployment is not a permanent benefit. It's 26 weeks at $275. It's meant to tide people over and help them get put back into the workforce, to find good gainful employment. And all this does is it gives them more opportunity. So instead of there being just one or 2 activities that they can do, there's a whole list of activities that qualify now. So it actually expands that. But really what we're trying to do is just generate some activity, get them to actually apply for jobs. And if you apply, to make sure that you go in for the interview. That could be a terrific job, and it may change their life and put them on a different trajectory. So all we're trying to do, this is not punitive or anything. We're just trying to help people find jobs. That's ultimately what we're doing here.
Representative Pearson.
And can you mention the 2 new claims that are being added? You said there were 2, but now there are 4 things that people could do toward getting a job. Could you read those?
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, so now they can do a department-approved job search skills assessment. They can complete a department-approved job search plan. They can participate in an on-the-job training opportunity. They can take a civil service exam. They can develop a complete resume in the state's employment service system. They can submit a resume to an employer. They can complete and submit a job application to an employer. They can attend and complete an interview with an employer. They can attend a job fair, or they can complete a skills test assigned by the employer as part of the interview process.
Representative Pearson.
And if for some reason a kid got sick or anything like that, that happens to the majority of us, is there in this legislation, I'm reading through the amendment, anything in this legislation that offers some exception for them not losing their benefits if there was a reasonable reason that they couldn't attend?
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Absolutely. We did put a provision in there that if the failure is due to an illness or a disability that occurred after the claimant has registered to work and they can submit a certificate by a licensed physician, then they would be excused. And ultimately, although a lot of this is automated in today's digital environment, there's still a person at the Department of Labor, a human being that would be dealing with this. So, and we talked about that in Chairman Dennis Power's subcommittee. This came up quite a bit. And we discussed this, and I brought that out. And so, yeah, there's always going to be a human being that can be involved in that decision.
Representative Pearson.
Yep. Thank you for that. And I appreciate that the length of opportunities for someone to be engaged in the workforce is there. I'm always concerned that anything where the penalty is potentially a financial burden on folks who are already struggling, likely already poor, and us then saying, well, because you missed this for whatever reason, you no longer have benefits for a week, because the same folks who are unemployed have children, right? Like the consequences of that seem quite severe. And I don't think that's the stick that you need in order to help generate people being in the workforce. Raising the minimum wage. There are a lot of other things that I think can be done that help to boost our economy and get people engaged in the workforce. And having done workforce development work for a number of years for a few thousand folks, I think there's a lot of other programs and practices that we could take that don't necessarily have a penalty associated with it in that way that's attached to money that we could explore.
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, I mean, we don't intend for this to be punitive, but I mean, if you apply for a job and tell the Department of Labor that is one of your search activities, and they invite you for an interview and you don't show up and you ghost them, I mean, I think it's fair that you lose the benefits for that week. It was discussed making it permanent, but we decided to cool that back a little bit and just say for that week and that week only.
Representative Pearson.
I would think about how we could support them for missing the interview. Is it a car?
All right. Representative Hardaway.
I'm saying,
Thank you, Speaker. And I want to thank Rep. Miller and Rep. Dixie for their consultation. To the sponsor, the programs that you have to track and account for in order to continue receiving the services, do those include educational opportunities? Do they include training programs?
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the Department of Labor does have those programs. And so if an otherwise eligible claimant is in training with the approval of the administrator, and that could be a variety of work programs that they have, then they would not, the person at the Department of Labor could override that. So there's a lot of other things that you can do if you're in an approved work program or a training program that would be eligible as well.
Representative Hardaway.
Okay, and I'd hate to think that one person would have the call on this. Do we need to come back next year and put more language in to make the eligibility clear and not leave it as an option for an individual employee and the department to determine?
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, you could certainly file a piece of legislation if you're not happy with this one. Really, all we're changing is we're expanding the number of things that a person can do. Where it used to be you could apply for a job and that was pretty much it. I'm simplifying it there. We're giving them just a whole list of things that they can do. Now, there are training programs. If you're in it, I just want to reemphasize that because I think that's kind of what the focus of your question is. That still exists. We've not changed any of that. If you lose your job or you're laid off and you get put into a job training program, we want you to do that job training program. And you can get your unemployment during that period of time. That's not changed. But if you are laid off and you're immediately looking for work, and that's what you're using, that's your job search requirement that entitles you to unemployment benefits, then you're going to have to follow through with those interviews. You're going to have to do one more per week than you did before, and it gives you a whole list of things to choose from.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, and the other concern, and you may have touched on this, I didn't see anything that addressed it in the summary. Things such as transportation, child care, and these are items that it's been documented keep women in particular from being able to take advantage of job opportunities and training opportunities and educational opportunities that would otherwise be available to them and men.
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't hear a question there, but I will say that the unemployment program is a federal program that's administered kind of at the state level, and you are eligible for a maximum of $275 a week for up to 26 weeks. Now, there's a bill that we passed a couple of years ago that's going to be implemented sometime in the future that will change that a little bit, but currently that's what unemployment benefits are. The other things that you're talking about, it does not cover those, nor has it ever covered those things. There may be other state programs that deal with those issues, but that's not what I'm working on in this legislation.
Representative Hardaway.
All right, thank you. So I appreciate you breaking it down. I would suggest that all of these pieces have to fit in order to ensure that our citizens can take advantage of the piece that this does address. So I would encourage you and the rest of my colleagues to pay attention to the other services that will make it possible for our citizens to take advantage of the program that you are affecting with this legislation. So thank you for some of the legislation.
Representative Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? There's objection. We're voting on previous question. All those in favor vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Cochran, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
74, 23 nays.
Previous question prevails. We are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1060 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Aye, 79, 19 nays.
House Bill 1060, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion for reconsider is tabled. Representative Parkinson, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know I might be out of order, but today is National 420 Day, and I was trying to see how that would have affected this bill in the last bill presented. But thank you and congratulations. Happy 420 Day to all those that are celebrating in Tennessee.
Representative Jones, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm rising with a parliamentary inquiry. I was trying to show the House Speaker the House rules, rule number 32, in which it gives us some protection of democracy, that anytime the Speaker cannot unilaterally decide to shut off a member's microphone and shut us down from speaking, but we can challenge it under Rule 32. And I was trying to be recognized under Rule 32 to poll 5 members to object and overturn the Speaker's ruling, because we still are a democracy. And you cannot unilaterally shut off our microphone, shut off debate, and shut off members who represent 78,000 people from speaking. And so I wanted to appeal your ruling. And I want to understand the clerk, if he can explain this rule to the House, the way to appeal the rulings of the Speaker from shutting off people's microphone.
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, the representative quoted Rule 32, appeals to House on rulings of the Speaker. That applies to rulings made on motions. For example, if a member makes a motion and the Speaker rules that motion out of order, 5 members can challenge that appeal. What the representative is addressing falls under Rule 19, transgression of rules by member. I will read it exactly. Any member who, in speaking or otherwise, transgresses the rules of the House, the Speaker shall, or any other member may call such transgressing member to order, in which case the member so called to order shall immediately sit down unless permitted to explain. And the House shall, if appealed to, decide the case without debate. If there be no appeal, the decision of the chair shall prevail. If the decision be in favor of the member called to order, such member shall be permitted to proceed without leave of the House. If otherwise, such member shall not be permitted to proceed in case any member objects and continues without leave of the House. And if the case require it, such members shall be liable to the censure of the House.
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In that provision, it says that there is an appeal. Rule number 32, which the parliamentarian just told us before he spoke to the House Speaker, says any 5 members of the House may appeal to the House from the ruling of the Speaker, and a majority vote of the members present shall decide the appeal. There is a way to appeal the ruling of the Speaker for any type of motion, for any type of decision made. This is what the rules say. This is still a democracy. We cannot make up the rules simply to appeal and to appease the Speaker, Mr. Parliamentarian. And so Rule 32 clearly lays out a process of a 5-member objection to appeal any ruling of the Speaker, and that's what you just told myself and Leader Camper as we were standing up there
Mr. Clerk,
in the dais.
let's answer his question, I think.
Mr. Speaker, what I'm trying to explain is that these are 2 different processes. I'm not saying that if a member is called out of order for their speaking, that they can't be appealed to. Rule 19 says that that appeal can be made, and it doesn't even require 5 members. If members object to a member being ruled out of order, then the House shall decide the case without debate. Rule 32 is for motions that are ruled out of order. I'm not saying that when a member is called out of order and told to sit down, which the rule says they shall sit down, that can't be appealed.
Representative Pearson.
Where in our rules does it say that those rulings have to be specific to motions?
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, what I'm speaking about, appeals to ruling of the chair, challenging the chair. There are other provisions in the Mason's manual that I can provide. I will admit the rule does not specifically say that it applies to motions. I'm saying that you can appeal under Rule 19 for what happened earlier today.
Representative Pearson.
Herein lies the challenge of this institution and of the rule-making process that happens on the floor. There is nothing specifically saying that it's specific to motions that an appeal can be made by 5 members. And yet you spoke so definitively that that was the case, and that was wrong. Now you've mentioned another code, not in our permanent rules, related to this issue. And it turns the rules that we talk about going by in their permanence into tools to be used by the parliamentarian or the speaker to keep things the way that they are. Because we know, because myself and Representative Jones actually were expelled from this body, that we did not obey Rule 19. And so just stating that a rule is a rule does not mean it is being applied appropriately. And so we need to have an intentional reality check with ourselves about what the rules do and do not do beyond the opinion of the parliamentarian and to the democratically voted on rules of the body.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and parliamentary inquiry. So, Mr. Clerk, can you tell us the specific appropriate procedure to appeal a ruling by the Speaker that would lead to one's mic being cut off? What is the appropriate action for us to take to appeal that as provided by the rule?
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, if a member gets ruled out of order in their speaking because they have transgressed our decorum rules, if members feel that that was not proper, then they need to raise objection. And when that objection is raised, then under this rule, it says that the appeal will be taken up without debate, and the body can decide whether or not that action was appropriate. And if the vote is in the favor of the member who got ruled out of order, they'll be allowed to continue and finish out their time. It doesn't require 5 members.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So the member who is ruled out of order can individually object without 4 others, and then the vote would go to the board. Is that correct?
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that member or any other member could object. And yes, it says the case shall be decided by the House without debate.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Speaker. And that was the question I was going to ask also. To what degree is it the raising of our hands, or is it standing and objecting? What is the process for us to object to that? I know in committees, we raise our hands objection, but also on the House floor, we raise our hands objection to previous questions. So if we want to appeal that, do we raise our hands or do we stand to our feet and grab the mic? What is the process for that?
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, it's just like when you object to any other motion, it's the same procedure.
Representative Hardaway.
Thank you. Thank you, Speaker. And it's along the same lines, but I want us to be clear on how to object when your mic is turned off. Does that member raise his hand? Does that member give you a vocal appeal? What's the process, and whether it comes from the clerk or the speaker?
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that could be a vocal objection or it could be the raising of hands.
Representative Hardaway.
And when that objection, and I'm assuming that the word objection is how it would be made, is the speaker at that time obligated to recognize the member who is raising the objection?
Mr. Clerk.
Standard process would be for the speaker to recognize that objection and ask the member for what purpose they seek recognition. They could state their objection, but I want to be clear, Rule 19 says that it shall be decided without debate. So they wouldn't be able to get into an argument, but they would be able to say, I object and I want to appeal to the House of whether or not I can continue.
Representative Hardaway.
And I understand that there's no debate, but one of the problems has been the failure to be able to communicate once the microphone has been cut off. So we've got that part straight. Hopefully that will help us as we move along. Thank you.
Leader Lambert.
Mr. Speaker, and to the clerk, point of order. What is the proper procedure on how we can return to today's regular calendar and the next bill for discussion?
Mr. Speaker, that would require a call for the orders of the day.
Representative Leatherwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Orders of the day.
It's proper motion, probably second. Any objection? No objection. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1095 by Chairman Boyd relative to temporary healthcare staffing. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 702.
Chairman Boyd moves to substitute and conform Senate Bill 702, properly seconded without objection. So ordered. Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 702 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Boyd moves passage of Senate Bill 702 on third and final consideration. Probably second. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2, same as Senate Amendment number 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Same as the Senate amendment. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 2 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, in 2022, I passed a piece of legislation that asked the Comptroller's Office to study the effects and the cost of temporary staffing agency on long-term care facilities and nursing homes in Tennessee. And the numbers that we got back were actually astonishing. In 2019, $170,000 was spent on temporary staffing agencies and assisted living facilities. In 2022, that number had risen to $4 million. In 2019, $10 million was spent for temporary staffing agencies and nursing homes. And in 2022, $100 million on temporary staffing agency. So what House Bill 1095 seeks to do is to require these temporary staffing agencies that supply RNs, LPNs, and CNAs to nursing homes and assisted living facilities to hold them to the same standards that the nursing home or the long-term care facility would have if they employed the nurses directly. And so just a few of the things they would have to do, they would have to register with the Health Facilities Commission, submit a report twice a year. They would have to do a background check, make sure that the employee's name doesn't appear on the sex offender registry or the abuse registry or the ineligible persons registry. Additionally, it would require them to carry workers' compensation insurance. There are several other things on the list, but as you can imagine, these are things that would be required of anyone that's working in a nursing home that's going to be dealing with our elderly or vulnerable Tennesseans. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Boyd renews the motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Hammer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to applaud you, Representative Boyd. I work in the senior care industry, and this is such a huge issue, the temporary staffing items that have been going on. And so thank you for addressing this, and it's a great bill.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker. Sponsor, can you talk about an example where we're seeing sort of the grossly, I think this amendment prohibits a person from charging any other person a price for goods or services that is grossly in excess of the price generally charged for the same or similar goods or services in the usual course of business of temporary healthcare staffing provided by an agency as defined above during a declaration of executive order of normal. Can you talk about what a gross disparity might be? Because the only concern that I'm having is if you have an agency that is paying more than the average, like how we're defining what, like, well, they're charging too much because they're paying their workers $20 an hour. And I know most of them don't. I have a couple of these in my community as well. And so how are we not potentially having people who are paying their staff more, charging more because of that, harmed by this legislation?
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That was a long question, but I think what you're getting at is just kind of an anecdotal example of when this might take place. So let's say that there's a nurse working at a nursing home making $25 an hour. They get a little bit short-staffed, and then a staffing agency brings some folks in that work for them. And they may or may not be paying more than $25. Maybe they're paying $30 an hour, but they're charging the nursing home, say $75 or $80 an hour for that labor. And a lot of that's passed on to the state through Medicaid, TennCare. And then folks go, well, if I could make $35 an hour, I'll leave and go to the staffing agency. And then they get, again, the facility might have to pay $100 an hour. 30 of that may make it to the worker. So, but the main thing we're doing here, we can't outlaw the practice. Temporary staffing agencies are a necessary part of our healthcare system in providing any of these RNs, LPNs, CNAs, and I'm sure there are other professions as well. But the challenge is Tennessee taxpayers are footing the bill for this. And it is, as I mentioned a minute ago, that the numbers tenfold from $10 million to $100 million just in 3-4 years. And so this has got to be addressed. And the best way that we think we can do it is hold these temporary staffing agencies to the same employment standards that we would the nursing home itself.
Representative Pearson.
Last question here is by whose determination is it ultimately about whether or not this is gross or this is too much? Like, who is this ultimately going to?
Chairman Boyd.
I mean, the General Assembly thinks it's too much. I think it's too much. I mean, that's why I carried the legislation. It's a tenfold growth. What's it going to do 3 years from now? I mean, we're going to be paying $1 billion then. We just can't afford this. And so what we're trying to do, because we are a free market society, and we're not going to put our foot on these folks and say that you can't have a temporary staffing agency. But by golly, if you are a temporary staffing agency, you're going to have to meet the same requirements that we have for anyone that works and treats and cares for elderly and vulnerable Tennesseans.
Representative Pearson.
I think the question I'm asking is accountability. Who's holding the staffing agencies accountable? If there's not this increase in payment, that's fine. But if we don't want there to be a decrease in service either. So who is responsible for the implementation of this legislation?
Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, I understand what you're getting at now. Right now, no one. After this bill passes, they will have to register with the Health Facilities Commission, and they will be licensed under them like any other facility.
Representative Pearson.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we are voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 702, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays, one present, not voted.
Senate Bill 702, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most read series table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1311 by Chairman Kumar, relative to graduate physicians. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill's on the desk.
Chairman Kumar, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 937.
Chairman Kumar moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 937, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Chairman Kumar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 937 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Kumar moves passage of Senate Bill 937 on third and final consideration, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Government Operations Committee Amendment number 1, filed as House Amendment 2.
Chairman Reagan, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment makes the bill. Move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman Reagan moves adoption of amendment number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, when a student graduates from medical school and passes step 1 and step 2 of the licensing exam, their next step is to apply for a residency at a hospital or university center for specialization. This is a computer-based matching program between the hospitals and applicants, and about 10% of these applicants will not get a suitable match. In Tennessee, the previous year, there were 664 medical graduates, so that means 60 or so of them did not get a match. After the match, there is a day of scramble, but that is mostly for primary care, and those who have their aims to be a specialist do not get satisfactory placement. So these graduates who have finished medical school and have passed the first 2 parts of the licensing exam are really in a purgatory at that time. This bill creates a program that they can work under supervision of a licensed physician in a medically needed area for a period of 2 years until they achieve a residency match. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I renew my motion.
Chairman Kumar renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Towns.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Chairman Kumar, does this help us to retain our graduates in the state of Tennessee? Because I've heard that when they go for that scramble, they don't find anything. They eventually, they're out of the hunt, so to speak. But will this help us without compliment?
Chairman Kumar.
Certainly, if they do not find suitable spot for themselves and they're looking to find a place where they can still work under supervision, although a lot of them are leaving our state and going to other states that have similar programs, and this will keep them in Tennessee and help with our shortage of physicians.
Representative Towns.
I think it's an excellent bill. We paid for them. We need them here and we want them here. So thank you for the bill.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker. I just wanted to clarify one point. All of the graduate physicians, assistants who are getting this certification they would be practicing under a currently licensed practicing physician in order to be able to operate. They wouldn't be operating independently. Is that right, sponsor?
Chairman Kumar.
You're correct, Representative Pearson.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you. And another section of this that I thought was really important that I want to think about or hear how we are ensuring that these folks who would be getting the certification as graduate physicians, and I want to thank Dr. Amir Hobson for helping me think through this legislation, where it says this will work, these services will be provided primarily in underserved and rural areas of the state pursuant to a collaborative practice agreement with the licensed physician. How are we going to hold folks accountable to that? Because we know in a lot of rural communities where the hospitals are closed because people are uninsured, and a lot of other places, there's this need. How are we going to make sure that that need is met, or what directive is being given in order for that to happen?
Chairman Kumar.
Those collaborative agreements are monitored by the Board of Medical Examiners. So they are specified areas that are declared to be medically have a short supply of physicians. So the program is monitored by the Board of Medical Examiners.
Representative Pearson.
Okay, got it.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 937 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
Senate Bill 937 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed by objection. Most read serious table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 394 by Representative Reedy relative to inspection programs.
Chairman Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 394 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Reedy moves passage. Bobby Secretary, Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Agricultural and Natural Resources Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Todd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill. Move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Chairman Todd moves adoption. Amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. Adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, this will be known in the future as the Tennessee Meat and Meat Products Act. As amended, it designates the Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture as the state official responsible for cooperating with the United States Secretary of Agriculture, USDA, under the Federal Meat Inspection Act, requires the Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture to cooperate with USDA to develop and administer a meat inspection program with requirements at least equal to those imposed by the Federal Meat Inspection Act. The policy intent of this bill is that meat and meat food products are an important source of the supply of human food in this state. Legislation to ensure that the food supplies are wholesome, unadulterated, and otherwise fit for human consumption and properly labeled is in the public interest. The lack of a state meat inspection program causes a significant loss of revenue generated from meat processing for this state and stifles opportunities for farmers in this state to expand their meat processing capacity. A state meat inspection program would ensure that the preservation of family farms and local businesses and enhance rural economic development as well as the environment and social wealth of rural communities. Without a state meat inspection program, it is currently prohibitively expensive for food banks to receive and distribute meat, which limits the ability of food banks to provide senior citizens with meals containing high amounts of protein and other important nutrients. A state meat inspection program would decrease the cost receiving and distributing meat for food banks and allow food banks to provide meals containing high amounts of protein and other important nutrients to senior citizens who are often underserved by food assistance programs. And a state meat inspection program that is locally controlled would preserve the ability of communities to produce, process, sell, purchase, and consume locally produced foods. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Reedy renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Burkhart, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is a great bill, and I appreciate the sponsor bringing it, and it's great work. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Jones, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was a member of the Agriculture Committee and have talked to some farmers about this bill. In fact, we had a farmer testify before Agriculture Committee opposing this legislation. I just want to get some things clarified on the record. The first concern was that this would impact interstate commerce. And so we would have the Tennessee inspected meat, but if you try and sell your goods in Georgia, North Carolina, any of the surrounding states, they would not recognize this because it's not been vetted by the USDA. How do you reconcile that, that kind of issue that comes up with interstate commerce?
Chairman Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative, on there, in the discussion, we have 19 slaughterhouses that are USDA inspected. Under the rules from the federal government, they have interstate compacts. Well, I guess they wouldn't call them compacts, but they can sell across state line. But for your smaller operator owners, they don't have that type of inspection, nor can they even, I guess I need to use an example. On my farm, the cattle that I raise, I do not use hormones or antibiotics. You would love the quality of the beef I produce on my farm. However, if you wanted to purchase any of that animal, you got to buy half or you got to buy whole. And when you tell me that you want to buy that animal, then I take it to whatever slaughterhouse you want me to take it to. Then I lose possession of that animal. They will contact you and your family and ask, how do you want it cut up for a family of 2, a family of 4? So what this bill will do is create the in-state inspection. So if your church, family group, whatever decides they want to have a cookout, well, you come to me and say, well, I just need 200 pounds of ground beef. I don't need to buy a whole animal for this outing. Then I would be allowed to sell you that amount.
Representative Jones.
And so I guess that response is saying that there would be an issue with interstate commerce. You would not be able to sell this Tennessee inspected, quote unquote, inspected meat in other states because they don't recognize that seal if it's not the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And so my next question is how do we ensure that the quality and the public health concerns are met, because the USDA is setting a standard? And so how do we make sure that this new process that you're setting forth is aligned with that standard, that we maintain that going forward? Because there are some concerns about public health around this and about the standards of making sure that the inspections were of the same par as the federal government.
Chairman Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, so currently the program is, out of these 19 USDA inspected, they can sell across state line. With this, it would only be for sale intrastate. And then let me read again. Designate the commissioner of the Department of Agriculture as the state official responsible for cooperating with USDA under the federal meat inspection. Requires the commissioner of the Department of Agriculture to cooperate with USDA, develop and administer a meat inspection program with requirements at least, I'll say again, at least to those imposed by the Federal Meat Inspection Act. So what we'll be doing is, now, members, this is a lengthy process. And of course, we had a conversation with the state of Arkansas. Arkansas became the 29th state to have an in-state inspection. There's a 12-month period, an 8-step process, and developing an MOU with the federal government to say, yes, okay, you're doing it at least as good as we do for these inspectors. Okay, then after that time, there's a process where they want to make sure Tennessee is serious about doing this in the state with the same regulations they impose at the federal level.
Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was in the Agricultural Committee. I was a member when we had that farmer from East Tennessee, a cattle farmer, opposing this legislation, a Republican saying that he is concerned about the impact on public health. And I've talked to a few other farmers who share that concern, that we will do shortcuts if we do not continue to have this regulation from the federal level. We are very against regulation in this body, it's clear. But what regulation really is protection. It's making sure that we don't have illness in our food. It's making sure that our standard of health and of storage is up to making sure that our people are healthy and safe. And so there just seems to be a lot of concern. You said that it's intrastate, which means that it can only be sold in Tennessee because other states will not accept this in their state. And so I just think that this is a lot of money we're investing that may not be in the best interest of our residents here in Tennessee. And so just those are the concerns that I've heard, and just wanted to lift those up in this body.
Chairman Reedy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Renew my motion.
Representative Zachary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 394 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 85, non-nays, 2 present not voting.
House Bill 394, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The most considered table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 437 by Chairman Sapiki and others relative to retention. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Chairman Sapiki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 300.
Chairman Sapiki moves substitute and form Senate Bill 300, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Chairman Sapiki.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 300 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Sapiki moves passage of Senate Bill 300 on third and final consideration. Probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call the First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to withdraw in favor of the Senate amendment.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Sapiki, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I want to say thank you to all of the representatives who put forth options and changes to the third grade retention bill. We've worked fervently with the chairmen of education, the chairman of the Senate Department of Education, and the governor's office to come up with a plan here. Members, these are the corrections, the adjustments, and the enhancements to the third grade retention bill. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Sapiki renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Johnson of Knox.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, I remember when we left last session and went back home, and we heard a whole lot from the folks at home about how this was affecting their children, their families, how it's going to affect our education system. And unfortunately, and people were really motivated to come back here and fix the mess that we made with the third grade retention bill. And sadly, when folks got here, they sort of changed their mind, and we haven't done what our due diligence when what comes to what families, what teachers, what school want. And it's concerning to me that we have removed to the largest degree, the decision for retention should be made by the local school and the parents. We talk a lot here about parents' rights when it comes to their children's education. And retention should be based on the parents and the local school who know the child the best. And my concern is we are misusing tests for something they're not required. Our end of course test, our TCAP test are not reading level tests. I hear up here a lot, this 33% of students can read, and that is incorrect because that's not a reading level test that tests reading level, and that's not an accurate reading because the bell curve, straight 50%, in the middle of that is actually in the approaching proficient and not in the proficient category. So this is going to be detrimental to our kids. I have talked to so many parents this week whose kids are terrified about the test. And we're stressed to the max because they're afraid they won't be with their friends the next year, that they're going to be held back. And this is not the way to go about this. This is not what our parents wanted. This is not what our teachers wanted. Do you understand the new test that you're using the score for is let me make sure I'm correct. Are you using the last benchmark? You've added the last benchmark of the 3 benchmark tests. Is that correct?
Chairman Sapiki.
Could you ask the question again?
Representative Johnson.
You have added to this bill the last test taken and the 3 benchmarks tests that are given throughout the year. Is that correct, that you added that score to the formula?
Chairman Sapiki.
Are you talking to Universal Screener?
Representative Johnson.
Yes.
Chairman Sapiki.
Yes, if you've read the bill, which I assume you did, Section 1 talks about how we're going to use the last Universal Screener provided by the state of Tennessee to allow the locals to have another test or data point to make sure we make a good decision on whether or not a student should be retained or not.
Representative Johnson.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to verify that because it's important that that test, that score, that one score is actually meant to be taken as a 3 score, and to pull one of those out of context is not an accurate use of the data that is given to us by the benchmark test. So again, we're basing things on a pooled test score that's not really an accurate determinant for what we're using here. And I think it's critically important that we understand up here that this is not what principals, reading specialists, teachers, and parents ask us for. And I am not going to be able to support this bill because it doesn't do what we told parents we could do when we came back here this session. And I think that we are doing serious damage, and I hope people understand that. I hope you listen to your teachers, and I hope you vote according to that, because holding back students is research shows us how dangerous that is for our kids. And what we need to be doing is making class size smaller in kindergarten, first and second grade. If we want kids to be reading on third grade level, lower those class sizes in K1 and 2.
Chairman Sapicki. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Warner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Chairman, for the work and committee that's been done on this bill. Mr. Chairman, could you please give us, I think it's 9 or 10 different options that a student that gets held back, the way that student may move on?
Chairman Spicki.
I will not attempt to give all 9. There are 9 different ways that's already listed in the retention bill. Also, the Department of Education has promulgated a rule that if you do not want to take the advantage of using that last universal screener, you can still rely off the TCAP test, go down to the 40th percentile on the TCAP test, file an appeal, use that appeal process generated by the parents, now being in conjunction with the districts to be able to help with the paperwork to submit that appeal, and do it on a case-by-case basis. Or you can use the bill that we originally passed. If you are an approaching student on the third grade TCAP test, then you can either go to summer school, which is provided free by the state of Tennessee, all costs absorbed, or you can retest and show that you are approaching or proficient, on track or proficient. Or you can move on to the fourth grade, take a tutor provided by the state of Tennessee, paid 100% by the state of Tennessee, to get the necessary help in the fourth grade levels. There are multiple ways for a student to show to us, their teachers, their moms and dads, the system, that they are on track and proceeding on their educational outcome. You know, I didn't want to get into this, but I appreciate the question. In our budget we had yesterday, we had a lot of things in education. But one of the things we had a question on were prisons. Why are we funding another prison? And I'll tell you why we're funding another prison: because of lack of education of our children in the state of Tennessee. The correction people use the third grade literacy test to determine how many seats they're going to need and how many beds they're going to need in our prison system, Representative. Now, we can choose to build more prisons, or we can choose to fix education on the front end and give these kids an opportunity and a chance to take advantage of all the things that we do in education, with dual enrollment, with TCAT centers, with short-term credentials, with colleges and universities and opportunities, so that they don't wind up in our prison system. But able to proceed educationally, and every teacher will tell you this, and I hope I get it right. In K through 3, you learn to read. You learn to read. And in 4, through the rest of your educational outcome, you are reading to learn. We are putting ourselves and our children at an economic and educational disadvantage by allowing them to move out of third grade when they're not on grade level for reading and comprehension. We can continue down the road of what we are and what we've been, and we will continue to build prisons. We will continue to incarcerate people, and drugs, alcohol, teen pregnancy, gang violence, death, murder, mayhem will still be prevalent in our society. Or we can stand our ground, say we're not going to do this anymore, and we're going to change the way we do education in Tennessee. We're going to make sure our kids can read, write, and do math on grade level, and give them the opportunity so that one day they can sit here and be one of these people sitting in these 99 seats. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, long answer.
Representative Warner.
One last question there, Chairman. If this bill is passed and signed by the governor, will it take effect for these third graders here and now that's about to leave the third grade?
Chairman Spicky.
No, it will not. We substituted and conformed to the Senate version. It'll start in 23-24.
Representative Warner.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I definitely agree with the chairman's statement as far as the need for our children to be able to read by the third grade. I also love the resources that we put in to this. Couple of questions. If the student, well, let me ask this first. What is the cut score, TCAP cut score for being retained?
Chairman Spicky.
Are you asking me the current one right now?
Representative McKenzie.
The one as a result of this bill.
Chairman
Pass.
Spicky.
On the TCAP test, that's set by the Department of Education. That's another bill that probably you and I could argue about and probably work together on to try to establish that at the beginning of the year instead of establishing it at the end of the year when the tests are being taken.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I guess what I'm asking, there was a negotiation as it relates to what that percentile number was. What number did we settle on?
Chairman Spicky.
Thank you. I misunderstood your question. On the bill that we had before us in section 1, it talks about the 50th percentile that a student would have to score on that last universal screener.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yeah, that's what I was wanting. So if a student doesn't hit that percentile and he or she voluntarily goes through the summer reading program, what happens then if the student improves, well, I guess I ask it this way, how much does a student have to improve to not be retained?
Chairman Spicky.
Well, first of all, if a student would not score in the 50th percentile on the last universal screener and they would score approaching, then all the things I talked about of a student who's approaching could take place. But remember, the Department of Education has already said you can make an appeal down to the 40th percentile, so that's still valid there. But kind of one of the things to answer your question about is if a student, and defined by the Department of Education, which they've left it very loose right now, if a student goes to summer school and shows improvement, then they can be promoted to the 4th grade as long as they're willing to take a tutor.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you for that. And I guess the devil will be in the details on what that number looks like. My concern, one of my concerns is we're going to retain some students, right? They're going to voluntarily or involuntarily go through and not meet whatever benchmark is set by the Department of Education. My concern is our facilities in terms of the number of 3rd and 4th grade teachers. I know in my county, if they just use those numbers and no one did anything, it's like 2,600. So let's call it 750 students in my county if didn't make it through the testing, the summer program. How are we going to be able to physically house those students, those extra classes and extra teachers?
Chairman Spicky.
So if I understand your question, you're talking about the next year, if they're retained, how are we going to account for that? Well, there'd be less students going to the next grade level, so those teachers would just transition into the lower grade level, and then therefore you'd have those numbers met.
Representative McKenzie.
Thank you for that, Mr. Speaker, but I don't think it's going to be a direct line like that. I think we're going to end up with a program where we're going to have similar number of 3rd grade classes, and those numbers may go down, but it's not going to be 30 did not make it, so I'm going to turn a 4th grade teacher into a 3rd grade teacher. I think what we're going to end up with is a lot of extra classes under one building that's existing right now. So that's my biggest concern on that. But like I say, I love the resources. Hopefully they're going to be highly qualified, motivated teachers coming in there. We're going to feed students. We're going to provide transportation. So those parts, and like you said, this has been a long process. I do get. I'm just concerned with what we're going to do, because I agree with my colleague from Knox County in that retention is no magic bullet, and it's probably going to do some negative, emotionally negative things on our students. So I don't think we're done with this retention program. Thank you.
Chairman Spicky.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, one of the things it would lead to, if those children being retained for third grade, that next year you would have smaller class sizes, more intensive training for them. The students that would be going on to fourth grade, you'd have smaller class sizes. So some of the representatives here repeatedly offer suggestions for smaller class sizes. And so this might be the opportunity to do that grand experiment to see if that does work, and then we could use the data from that moving forward.
Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the sponsor, you mentioned earlier that the universal screener that could be used by the districts would go down to the 40th percentile. I know that Metro Schools has alerted me to the fact that the department is still emailing out reminders about districts being able to use their own screener if they want to, which is different from the states. Is that correct? Can you explain more about how that process would work?
Chairman Spicky.
Absolutely. So currently, if you take this bill away, and this bill is not here before us right now, currently they can use the evaluation tool of the 40th percentile to make an appeal off of whatever they use. That's part of the data involved. What we're looking at here is, you know what, if a student's score is approaching on the TCAP test, there's very close to being on track. Is there another data point we could glean information from to give us the confidence that that student is close enough that they can move forward to the next level? That's where this bill comes in, is saying if you use the universal screener provided by the state, then if that student scores in the 50th percentile and that universal screener is given as a test, so the teachers aren't helping the kids take the test, that could be used in conjunction with the approaching categorization on the TCAP test to do automatic promotion for that student. So it gives them two pathways right off the bat to be able to move the students forward.
Representative Love.
Thank you, but just to be clear, districts are still able to use their own screeners, but just at a different percentile level, correct?
Chairman Spicky.
If they want to take advantage of this section of the bill, they would have to use the one provided by the state. If they don't wish to, they could use whatever they want.
Representative Love. Representative Haston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate the bill, appreciate the effort that we've had on this. I guess I just want to say that if we continue to set low expectations for our students, then that's the exact level that they're going to reach. That's what they're going to strive to get to, is those low expectations. I just don't believe that our students are going to crumble with stress and fear as we raise the expectations for them. I think that we're underselling what they are capable of. And I'm very disappointed to keep hearing, oh, they're going to have stress. They're going to have stress. They're not going to be able to handle this. And I think that that's very, very disingenuous to what our students are able to do and what they're able to handle. I hear about there's mental stress going to be for these students that are retained. Well, it's also a 3 times greater chance of that student dropping out if they're not reading proficiently by the 3rd grade. So what comes with a lot of stress is being able to be a dropout and then one day not have to have a better job. And what comes with not having a better job? Poverty. That comes with a lot more health, a lot more mental stress. So let's just keep that in mind as we're talking about the mental stress and maybe the short term and what we're saving them in the long term. Thank you for the bill. Thank you for your work.
Chairman Spicky. Out of order. Representative McCalman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question.
Previous question been called. There's objection. We're voting on previous question. All those in favor of previous question, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Mr. Clerk. Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Aye, 73, nays 21, one present not voting.
Previous question prevails. We are voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 300, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 82, nays 15.
Senate Bill 300 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1077 by Representative Thompson, relative to food that is available for consumption at farmers markets. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Representative Thompson, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1049.
Representative Thompson moves to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1049, probably second without objection. So ordered. Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1049 on third and final consideration.
Representative Thompson moves passage of Senate Bill 1049 on third and final consideration, probably second. Ms. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment Number 1, Mr. Speaker, is the same as Senate Amendment Number 1.
Chairman Terry, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, Amendment Number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
No further amendments, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Thompson, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senate Bill 1049 helps farmers markets all over the state. Does two things essentially. It defines a farmers market food unit and creates a farmers market food unit permit. And when permitted, it allows local vendors to prepare and sample foods at our local markets. It also allows vendors at farmers markets to offer samples of food for consumption without having to obtain a license or a permit. So essentially, this bill supports our local farmers and small business owners, but also aligns standards within our code to make this regulation more equitable and work better for our citizens. And with that, I renew my motion.
Representative Thompson renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Hardaway, you were up first.
Actually, Speaker, I had a parliamentary inquiry. I'll raise it after the bill is resolved.
Chairman Reedy.
Thank you, Representative, for bringing this bill forward. And it's part of what we just did for House Bill 394, trying to take care of our local farmers, the local farmers markets, and let people eat healthier in the state of Tennessee. Thank you for the piece of legislation.
Any further discussion? See none. Any objection to the vote? Question. See none. We are voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1049 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has everyone voted? Does anyone wish to change their vote? Whitson, aye. Clemens, aye. Mr. Clerk. Love, Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays, one present, not voting.
Senate Bill 1049 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare it passed without objection. The motion to reconsider is tabled. Call up the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 317 by Leader Camper, relative to Juneteenth. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 269.
Leader Camper moves substitute and conform Senate Bill 269, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Leader Camper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 269 on third and final consideration.
Leader Camper moves passage of Senate Bill 269 on third and final consideration, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment. Chairman Clemens, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to ask the speaker if you could instruct the troopers. We have a lot of women here advocating on behalf of a very important issue, and they are being harassed in the Capitol building and feel intimidated and threatened by certain individuals. So I would just ask the speaker if you could instruct the troopers to keep an eye on things. I think it's a fair request.
Are you saying the troopers are harassing them or just other people? Oh, okay, just making sure.
No. I apologize if I was unclear. There are citizens up here making other citizens feel uncomfortable. We have a lot of women who are up here advocating on an important issue, and there are certain members who are making threats and making them feel intimidated. So I just wanted to ask you if you could instruct the troopers to keep an eye on things, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, we have Amendment 1, and Mr. Speaker, Amendment 1 does not fit the caption of the bill.
Amendment 1's out of order. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Camper, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, members, what Senate Bill 269 does is change the designation of June 19th, known as Juneteenth, from a special observance holiday to a legal holiday. And that's all it does.
Thank you. Representative Love, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question been called. Is there objection? There's objection. We're voting on previous question. All those in favor of previous question, vote aye. All those opposed, vote no. Mr. Clerk. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Aye, 61, 24 nays, one present not voting.
Previous question prevails. We are voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 269 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Aye, 61, 18 nays, 10 present not voting.
Senate Bill 269 having a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection to the most read series table. Representative Jones, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was seeking recognition to be recognized to object to your overruling of my amendment I just want to state for the record that my amendment was under the same title of code around state holidays. We just passed the bill to make Juneteenth a state holiday. My amendment was to get rid of the holiday honoring a enslaver named Nathan Bedford Forrest. That's a state holiday. And so you ruled it out of order and did not allow it to be heard, even though it was under the same title of law.
Yeah, Mr. Clerk, why don't you explain why his amendment was outside the caption for him, please? Thank you, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, Article 2, Section 17 of the Constitution, bills may originate in either house, but may be amended, altered, or rejected by the other. No bill shall become law which embraces more than one subject, that subject to be expressed in the title. The subject expressed in the title of this bill was relative to Juneteenth.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Representative Ritchie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think this is a parliamentary inquiry. On the previous, right before we voted there was a previous question that went up on the board, and according to Rule 36, it says 2/3 of the member. I only saw 61 yeses up there. Is there any explanation on that, Mr. Clerk?
Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, it's not 2/3 of the body, it's 2/3 of the members present at the time of the vote.
All right. Call out next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 942 by Representative Alexander, relative to healthcare providers. Mr. Speaker, the Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Farmer, for what purpose?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know I'm out of order. I just want to make this quick. Representative Faison for Representative Carr. We have our Attorney General back there walked in, James B. Dunn, Jimmy Dunn of the 4th Judicial District. Just want to make him welcome. And he's appreciative of what we've done to help their conference out this year. So just thank you, members.
Mr. Clerk, I think there's a question about the 3 constitutional amendments.
Mr. Speaker, we're on item 17. Yesterday on this calendar, items 14, 15, and 16 were taken up and reset for today for their second reading. They appear on a regular calendar 2 that was set for today. They will be taken up at a later time. We're on item 17.
Let the journal reflect. Representative Travis is excused. Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 0361.
Representative Alexander moves substitute and form Senate Bill 361, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 0361 on third and final consideration.
Representative Alexander moves substitute and form Senate Bill 361 on third and final consideration, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call out First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to adopt.
Chairman Terry moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adoption of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill enacts the Dentist and Dental Hygienist Compact, an interstate compact to recognize dentist and dental hygienist licensures for member states. It establishes that the compact will become effective on the date on which the compact is enacted into the law in the 7th participating state, creates the Dentist and Dental Hygienist Compact Commission upon enactment of the compact, and it entitles each participating state to 1 delegate on that commission, authorizes a dentist and a dental hygienist with qualifying license who meet certain criteria to be awarded compact privilege to practice as a dentist or a dental hygienist in a remote state. I renew my motion.
Representative Alexander renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Pearson.
Thank you so much, Speaker. Who's accountable for the implementation of this compact?
Representative Alexander.
That would be the health department, the dental portion of the health department.
Representative Pearson.
And what is a compact privilege?
Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We would be the first in that compact, the first state in that compact. It would take 7 other states to join that compact. It would allow for dentists and dental hygienists to cross the state line. Like where we're from in Upper East Tennessee, State Street runs right through Virginia and Tennessee. It just allows them to cross over those lines and be able to practice their profession. We are short of dentists and dental hygienists in this state, and so it would just give us that privilege.
Representative Pearson.
Okay, I understand that. Thank you.
Representative Vaughn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question be called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 361 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 95, no nays.
Senate Bill 361 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reads here is tabled. Leader Lamberth. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consulting with the Democratic leadership, if we could take up Thursday regular calendar, item number 49, House Bill 355 at this time.
Proper motion, proper second. Any objection? Without objection, so ordered. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Item 49 on Thursday's calendar, House Bill 355 by Representative Alexander and others relative to coverage for breast examinations.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Speaker. Thank you, members. I move for House Bill 0355 on third and final consideration.
Representative Alexander moves passage. Following second, Ms. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Insurance Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Kumar, you're recognized.
Apologize, Mr. Speaker. This amendment rewrites the bill, move to adopt, and leave the explanation to the sponsor. Thank you.
Chairman Kumar moves adoption amendment number 1, properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you. Today, House members, I stand in front of you in a pink blazer for all the women who are going through breast cancer treatments. Thank you to this House for giving the right for women to be treated with possible breast cancer at no cost to them. It will save lives. Thank you. Motion.
Representative Alexander, you renew your motion. Representative Alexander renews your motion. Any
Yes.
discussion on the bill? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 355 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Littleton, aye. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 98, no nays.
House Bill 355 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. The motion reads here is tabled. Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, if we could take up item number 50, Thursday's regular calendar, House Bill 938.
No, Halsey's up next. House regular calendar 2, number 18. Just HIV.
Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that's item 50 on Thursday's calendar, House Bill 938 by Representative Alexander relative to municipal boundaries.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 0938 on third and final consideration.
Representative Alexander moves passage. Properly seconded. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Local Government Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Crawford, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment makes the bill move to adopt and defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chairman Crawford moves adoption of amendment number 1. Properly seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of amendment number 1 say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Alexander, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill would allow farmers, agriculture, farms who have been annexed without their will and without their consent prior to the law in 2014. It would allow them to petition their city to be de-annexed. I renew my motion.
Representative Alexander renews her motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker. Sponsor, can you talk a little bit more about why this legislation or how this legislation came about? Because I see that it's only about 10% of folks, registered voters, would be able to file a petition to be de-annexed, and then it's only going to be a majority of people who then vote. Can you talk about this process? Because it obviously, de-annexation, annexation are real responsibilities of local governments.
Representative Alexander.
This bill has been in the works for years. Started with Mike Carter, who felt farms land, who were not getting the services of the city, but were having to pay city taxes, would give them an opportunity to go back to the city and be de-annexed because they were not invited to, they were not asked about the annexation process. But they have to be a full-fledged farm. They have to be in Greenbelt. They have to actually be farmland.
Representative Pearson.
Okay. The concern I have is why couldn't those farms today or people in this position in our communities go to the local government with this request of being de-annexed? Why does that need to come from here when annexation, does the state approve the annexation of our local governments?
Representative Alexander.
Because there is a law in place now that you cannot annex property without the consent of the people who own the land. This was prior to that. This just allows those few farms across the state, and it's very few, to go back to their cities and get the ability to be de-annexed.
Representative Pearson.
Okay, that's helpful. So can you talk through a little bit of this process now? So these few farms will say they want to be de-annexed from their city, and then what happens?
Representative Alexander.
They petition their city to be de-annexed. They ask their city if they owe them anything. If the city chooses that they owe them something for any kind of services that they have provided in the past, then they settle that up financially with the city.
Representative Pearson.
Okay, but a part of this process is that a referendum must be held at the next general election. Is that still accurate? Ultimately, voters, or the people who are voting in that particular area and community, will decide. And so all the counties where this might apply, this would have to be added to the ballot in some way. Is that still part of the process?
Representative Alexander.
Not that I'm aware of, sir.
Representative Pearson.
So they only have to petition in order for it to happen? So trying to understand, it's almost like eminent domain in a sense that the public would be able to say that this is our property, we no longer want to be a part of you. And then the only remedy for the state government is to accept the petition and say, you owe us this amount of money for sewer and water. there's no ability for the community, the mayor, the alderman, whomever to say, we can't have you leave. Then making the petition automatically gives them the ability to de-annex themselves.
Representative Alexander.
It gives the ability for the farmer to go to the city and ask to be de-annexed, yes.
Representative Pearson.
I got that part. I think this is what I'm struggling. So they can ask to be de-annexed. Does it automatically have to be approved, or can they be denied the ability to be de-annexed?
Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Speaker. They would automatically be de-annexed if they pay what they owe the city.
Representative Pearson.
Okay, I got it.
Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Madam Sponsor, does this bill, was it generated by one specific farm, perhaps in your district?
Representative Alexander.
There is a farmer that came to me with this a couple years ago. It's the same one that came to Mike Carter with it. It's up in Unicoi County, which is up in East Tennessee. And there's other farmers that want it too in other parts of the state.
Representative Thompson.
Okay, well, thank you. But it does affect farms all over the state, is that correct?
Representative Alexander.
That is correct.
Representative Thompson.
Okay, does this have any consideration for the financial well-being of the municipality they're seeking to be de-annexed from?
Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Speaker. Yes, this is why the city is allowed to charge them for whatever services they have been given.
Representative Thompson.
Okay, thank you, but I am familiar with the de-annexation process. There was a portion of my district that was de-annexed just in recent years. But originally, the plan was that it would have severely affected the financial well-being of the city of Memphis, taking off $75 million. In the end, they went ahead and had an agreement with the city, a private agreement between the city and the petitioners to be able to have an agreement so it would not seriously affect, it hurt, but it didn't seriously affect the financial well-being of the city. And I'm wondering if there could be potentially somewhere around the state situation where it would seriously hurt the city who would be affected in this case.
Representative Alexander.
Thank you, Speaker. We have put in multiple safeguards in this legislation to protect the city. In fact, the Municipal League has come to me and says they have no problem with this legislation at this point. We've worked with them. We've done everything we can to protect the municipalities. It is very few farmers. I'm not sure about the property you were talking about in your area. I'm not even sure that was farmland. But this is all to do with protecting our farmers in this state. They are the ones that feed us, and they need every bit of protection they can get.
Representative Thompson.
Thank you again, and I appreciate those safeguards. I do have some concerns though, because I'm definitely not against family farms. In fact, I'm very much for them, but also am a little reluctant when we're dealing with a lot of potential situations in the future that might potentially affect other towns, other cities in a very negative way. So thank you very much.
Representative Alexander.
Thank you for your comments.
Representative McCalman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question.
Previous question been called. Is there objection? Not enough hands. We're ready. We're voting. All those in favor of House Bill 938 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 76, 16 nays, 2 present, unvoted.
House Bill 938 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed by objection. Most for series table. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We can now make a motion to return to House Regular Calendar 2, item number 18, House Bill 832.
Chairman Holsey, you're recognized. Oh, Mr. Clerk, call up the next bill.
House Bill 832 by Chairman Hulsey, relative to criminal offenses. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Chairman Holsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 807.
Chairman Holsey moves to substitute and form Senate Bill 807, probably second without objection. So ordered. Chairman Holsey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 807 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Holsey moves passage of Senate Bill 807 on third and final consideration, probably second. Mr. Clerk, call up First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Holsey, you're recognized.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, the legislature passed a bill. Am I correct?
Vice Chairman Gillespie, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment makes the bill. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I move adoption of House Criminal Justice Amendment number 1 and defer to the sponsor for further explanation.
Vice Chairman Gillespie moves adoption of amendment number 1, probably seconded. Any discussion on amendment? Seeing none. All those in favor of adopting amendment number 1 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopt the next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Holsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, this legislature passed a bill dealing when HIV was beginning to spread, and there was a great deal of fear of it and a great deal of knowledge that we didn't know about it. And they said that if you, under existing law, if you expose somebody to HIV, it's a Class C felony. But they also tacked on that you would be on the violent sexual registry list for the rest of your life, which causes a whole lot of problems now. And so what this bill does, it leaves the criminal penalty intact. You can still be charged with a Class C felony by exposing somebody, but it removes the mandate to put you on the violent sexual registry list. And that's what this bill does, is it pulls that portion out. And with that, I renew my motion.
Chairman Holsey renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know I spoke yesterday. The chairman had a bill up on a different bill about HIV, but I just wanted to say that I've spoken to the different advocacy community and they support this bill. So I also support this bill. Appreciate you bringing it. Thank you, Chairman.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 807 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member cast votes? Any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 78, 12 nays, 1 present, unvoted.
Senate Bill 807 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most for series table. Call the next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1444 by Leader Lamberth and others relative to criminal law.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of House Bill 1444 on third and final consideration.
Leader Lamberth moves passage, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Holsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Ways and Means Committee Amendment 1 improves upon this amendment by broadening the Class C misdemeanor. I move to withdraw House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment 1.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as Amendment 2.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to adopt and I defer to the sponsor for an explanation.
Chair Lady Hazelwood moves adoption amendment number 2, probably seconded. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor of amendment number 2 say aye, aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. You adopted. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this bill does 3 things. There's a vehicular homicide, specific type of vehicular homicide that was left out of the Truth in Sentencing bill last year, where someone kills someone in a vehicle and leaves the scene, and they're charged and convicted of vehicular homicide. That will be 100% sentence, just as we did with the other crimes of that nature. There was a nuanced issue that we fixed in the DUI law to make sure that the penalty is consistent throughout the state at the 48-hour minimum. We did not increase that. We just ensured that that was consistent language throughout the state. And then the last one fixes an issue that
we created earlier in the year dealing with hard debris falling off a vehicle is a C misdemeanor, just like a speeding ticket or something like that. Hard debris and hard debris only. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Leader Lamberth renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Pearson.
Thank you, Speaker. Sponsor, research that has come out has talked a lot about how incarceration doesn't really lead to rehabilitation, and oftentimes doesn't help reform people into being, as many of us have articulated, at least more productive members in society. Can you talk about the basis for having a 100% sentence imposed and why that would be in any way beneficial to us?
Leader Lamberth.
So thank you for the question. And I have not shared this probably in a few years on this floor, but I will at this point. So I appreciate the opportunity to do so. There are many of us in this room who have been touched by violent crime and whose families, the trajectory of your family has been altered. When I was just a child, my Aunt Lola was killed by a drunk driver. She was a wonderful young lady. She was 15 years old, and a drunk driver hit and killed her before I ever even got to know her. I know her through photographs. There are thousands and thousands of families throughout this state who know their relatives through photographs and stories, and for generations, their families are torn apart. I also know from what my parents went through, what the entire family went through at that time, and the 7 years I spent as an assistant district attorney, and then the many years since in private practice, just how devastating it is for victims of crime, especially violent crime, to go through the criminal justice system. Yes, absolutely. I join you in saying we should do everything we can to rehabilitate those that are incarcerated. But when you have to go through the parole system over and over and over again, it is devastating for both the defendants' families, and I guarantee you the victims' families as well. Every time that a person is up for parole, it reopens those wounds that have barely begun to heal. So we all come to this chamber from a place of personal experience and representing our communities. Mine has always been that while we focus on justice for the defendant, while we focus on a system that should rehabilitate those individuals, I have always stayed laser focused on the innocent victims of violent crime to ensure that our communities are safe and that we do everything we can to both reduce the number of victims and survivors we have out there so fewer families have to go through what my family went through, but also to make sure that at every turn we can make that criminal justice process a little bit easier on those victims. They didn't make any choice to come into the criminal justice system. They were dragged into that criminal justice system because of the actions of another. So with this bill, the reason that this vehicular homicide, where someone kills someone in a vehicle and leaves the scene, very callous behavior, obviously, if they are tried, if they are convicted, if a judge decides to give them a 2-serve sentence, then no victim's family should ever have to go back to the parole board over and over and over again to beg this system to keep that individual incarcerated. That's the reason for the bill.
Representative Pearson.
We're going to disagree vehemently on this because there's no proof that this works, that telling someone that they serve 100% of their sentence works. And in fact, it's a false solution because victims are not being prioritized in the process. For instance, if you look at restorative justice, what's required is both a victim and the perpetuator of the harm to reach a solution. This doesn't offer an opportunity for a victim's family to say, I would like to meet them, speak with them, see them, talk with them, right? It doesn't do that. It says that this legislative body can think for those victims. And I am sorry about the losses that you have experienced, and I too have experienced loss. My own cousin, TJ, was killed because of gun violence, and you see how hard I'm working, and we're working up here to change that. But the reality is, this is not a fix. This is not a real solution to preventing crime, nor for helping citizens who are incarcerated, who have committed atrocities or bad things from being rehabilitated. And we shouldn't be dictating that if you serve 100% of your time, we have somehow fixed or solved the problem. That just is not true. And it only feeds into further mass incarceration, which we have in this state and should stop.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, and thank you for your comments. I will tell you that the recidivism rate on those that are incarcerated is virtually zero. While they're incarcerated, they will not harm any other Tennessean outside those prison walls. I want them to get help, but they cannot hurt anybody while they were there. And I believe in restorative justice. I do. I believe that those survivors that wish to reach out and have some contact with the defendants that harm their family, I support those efforts. But I will tell you, I don't want to meet the man that killed my Aunt Lola. What I want was for her to be able to grow up and graduate high school. I want to make sure that she was able to get married and have children, to be able to experience my life. I would hope that my Aunt Lola would be able to be here in the balcony today. But a man who thought it was more important to get drunk on his way to Mardi Gras with his buddies stole that from me and my family. So forgive me if I fight for those folks instead of the deadbeat that killed her.
Representative Warner, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? There's objection. We're voting on previous question. All those in favor say vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Aye, 72, 23 nays, one present, not voted.
House Bill 1444, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed. Oh, previous question, my fault. Previous question failed. We are voting. All those in favor of House Bill 1444 as amended, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 80, 16 nays.
House Bill 1444, having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most for consider table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 403 by Leader Lamberth and others relative to cannabis. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 378.
Leader Lamberth moves substitute conform to Senate Bill 378, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Leader Lamberth.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move passage of Senate Bill 378 on third and final consideration.
Leader Lamberth moves passage of Senate Bill 378 on third and final consideration, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Criminal Justice Committee Amendment number 1.
Chairman Holsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment 1 improves upon this amendment. And with that explanation, I move to withdraw House Criminal Justice Amendment 1.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Finance, Ways and Means Committee Amendment number 1 filed as House Amendment 2. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment 3.
Chair Lady Hazelwood, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Since it's same as the Senate amendment, move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 2 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Leader Lamberth, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And members, we worked on this a lot last year to try to deal with the issue of hemp-derived cannabinoid products. There are no regulations on those products currently. Any child could walk into a store, buy as much of this product as they would like, and many of those children have overdosed. Not a lethal overdose, but still a definitely medically dangerous overdose that they should not be exposed to these products. So this bill does many things, but in large part, it puts some very strict regulations around these products, ensures that they can only be sold to those that are over 21. It puts packaging and testing and taxes and everything else on these products because they are out there. They're all over the state, and you can't walk into a convenience store, a grocery store, a market somewhere without seeing them. And most of our constituents have no idea what they're buying. And it's because there's no regulations. And so this really does ensure that, these are behind the counter, they're for over 21. It goes after any bad actors that would try to prey upon innocent citizens with misinformation. It's got full safety panel test. It's got all that on the packaging and requires these to be kept in the packaging, but still allows for this industry to continue to flourish. But it just makes sure that it has guardrails on it. With that, Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Leader Lamberth renews the motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Leader, I just want to tell you thank you for working on this. I know we've had many conversations on it. and also your willingness to come to the table with everybody involved to get this legislation in good shape where everybody is comfortable. There's some much needed consumer protection and child protection built into it. So again, thank you very much and appreciate your work.
Leader Lambert.
Thank you, Chairman Hurd. And for those that may not know, Chairman Hurd and many others in this body, but especially Chairman Hurd, has worked a long time on these issues. And I think everybody in this chamber knows these are not my particularly favorite products. I'm not wild about the fact that folks use them at all, but if you're an adult and you're over 21 and you wish to partake in this product, then they are out there, and we've just tried to make it as safe as possible. So,
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So with the amended version of this bill, Mr. Leader, are we prohibiting anything from selling anything that is not currently allowed under state law?
Leader Lambert.
yes, I mean, it outlines in here exactly what is allowed, and it has to be. I mean, it defines cannabinoids. It defines what. It has a lengthy list in the amendment of items that are permitted. It makes it very clear that marijuana, Delta 9, is absolutely still illegal. It puts the parameters around what types of products are allowed. Now, the vast majority of products that are out there on the market right now will still be permitted, but they will have to be regulated and fall within that category. The reason I can't tell you exactly what all is on the market now that will be prohibited is there's no labeling, there's no quality controls, we don't really know all of the products that are being sold because they've never been regulated like this. So it specifies what can be sold, and if there is something that is out there that does not fall within this amendment, within this law, if it passes, then those products would no longer be able to be sold.
Chairman Clemens.
So just to clarify, there are things that are currently being sold that are allowed by law that are now going to be prohibited by this legislation. I understand the regulatory side of it and the need for additional regulation, but there are things currently that are being legally sold right now that are going to be prohibited by this.
Leader Lambert.
That is possible.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So as you said, this stuff's being sold statewide. There's tons of different products. It does require regulation, but why are we not just going ahead and legalizing cannabis statewide to end this piecemeal adoption of policies with regards to cannabinoids? Why don't we just legalize cannabis?
Chairman Clemens. Lambert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I was looking for my notes on that. So there are thousands of people every single year that go to inpatient treatment for addiction to marijuana. That's a fact. So in legalizing marijuana, I just spoke on a bill that deals with driving under the influence. When you look at other states that have legalized marijuana, their fatalities due to marijuana intoxication go up. The number of individuals that become addicted to marijuana go up. I mean, it is not a safe product in any form, period. And so this hemp-derived cannabinoid, if properly regulated, is at least a safer option. Look, I've said publicly and will say again, there's no truly safe way to use these products. But at the same time, if someone over 21 wishes to use alcohol right now or smoke cigarettes or do any other things that are, dangerous to their health, this is at least a way to regulate these products that are already out there. So Delta 9 THC, marijuana as we know it, is still much more powerful than these products, is still much more intoxicating than these products, is still something that will remain illegal. But this just regulates the products that are already out there.
Chairman Clemens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I think your point was just made. I mean, I don't have a problem with the age of 21 or any of that stuff because that's the same things we put into law with respect to alcohol sales. But alcohol kills far many more people. That data is clear, but we're not prohibiting that. I still don't understand and understand the logic of why we wouldn't legalize cannabis for any purpose as opposed to alcohol. Alcohol-related deaths, drunk driving is the second highest killer in the state of Tennessee of young people, right behind gun violence. So why aren't we legalizing cannabis?
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you. So, and I pull these numbers every year, and I would encourage everyone to. This comes from the Department of Mental Health, and this is directly from those that are going to inpatient treatment for substance abuse. So in 2012, when I first got here, the number one abused substance was opioids. You had 31% of those going to inpatient treatment, about 4,147 people for opioids. Next was alcohol, then marijuana, about 2,215. And while this national discussion has been going on about legalizing marijuana and how, that should be something that, folks should do and that some states have done so, in 2020, the number one abused substance was still opioids, a massive jump from 4,147 people to 10,889 folks for inpatient treatment. Marijuana is now above meth, and alcohol is the second most abused substance. 6,767 people went in 2020 for inpatient addiction to marijuana. It's just a bad idea to legalize it.
Representative Pearson.
Yeah, I think obviously we should legalize marijuana, but why aren't we, where's the bill to prohibit alcohol? No, we just said there are a lot of people who are inpatient healthcare because of alcohol. I see this bill, but why don't we have a bill prohibiting alcohol as well and tackle all of these instances of substance abuse by prohibitions?
Leader Lamberth.
Well, nationally, we tried that in the 20s, and they did. And then they actually reversed that through two different constitutional amendments. And so here we are.
Representative Pearson.
Yeah, I mean, looking at how Tennessee operates, I'm sure there are some prohibitions that we could create that still would be within the law as we've seen. But what's really interesting to me as we've been having this big discussion in our state about gun violence and things is to see the regulations coming up as it relates to this in particular. And one of the things that I'm curious about and would love your perspective on is why the age of 21 instead of the age of 18 was chosen for this legislation.
Leader Lamberth.
So again, that matches up with other intoxicating substances like you mentioned in alcohol. So it literally just makes the statutes match up with that.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you. When you were talking and thinking about this legislation and to us, there were a lot of things that are being regulated, the packaging, the testing, making sure that bad actors wouldn't be able to use this, ensuring that people who are 21 years old or younger rather wouldn't be able to access it, making sure that there are all these protections in place. From literally none regulations to a lot of regulations for something that you view and a lot of other folks view needs to be regulated. This same energy, right, this same effort is possible and needs to happen in other legislation that people are asking about. Because, and what you're articulating, that we're moving from 21 to 18, is the protections that we want to have of younger people, is the protections we want to ensure exist in our state for things that are dangerous and are harmful. And so the same principles that we're operating with to move forward legislation like this is the exact same principles that thousands of people are advocating for as it relates to gun violence.
Leader Lamberth.
Thank you. And so there is no constitutional right to use hemp-derived products. There's no constitutional right to drink alcohol. So when we're dealing with these issues, the court system has been clear that, when it comes to certain constitutional rights, then a lot of that interplay occurs on, whether or not you can go to 21, whether or not you can go to 18, like the right to vote, for instance. I mean, that kicks in at 18, the right to contract, many other things. But when dealing with these issues, thus far anyways, the courts have made it clear that states can set at 21 for certain intoxicating products, that we can set that at 21. Now, again, that is a healthy discussion we can have as a state as to where it should be, but this just lines it up with whether intoxicating products are. And I don't think gets into any of the constitutional entanglement between 18 to 21, because we're not talking about a constitutional right of any kind with this particular product.
Representative Pearson.
Thank you. I understand your point and perspective, and still, I think as a legislative body of people who want to ensure the protection of children in our communities, there is much more that can be done and should be done by this body.
Representative Brickham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm out of order, but I would like to recognize a good friend of mine and a Tullahoma City Alderman who came to the gallery today, Daniel Berry. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Dixie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the sponsor, I just have two quick questions. One is, what's the effective tax rate on here? I see in a couple of places it has privilege tax. One says 5%, one says 6%. So just if I was a retailer, what would the tax rate be that I would be paying?
Leader Lamberth.
Yes, sir. And again, similar to other products of this nature, it has an additional tax rate of 6% of sales tax.
Representative Dixie.
Also, does the way that this is being taxed, does it differ anyway from the cigarette tax?
Leader Lamberth.
It does slightly.
Representative Dixie.
And what's that difference?
Leader Lamberth.
I'm sorry, I don't have the distinct difference. It's just, if I remember correctly, I think it is slightly above.
Representative Dixie.
Thank you.
Speaker Pro Tem Marsh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll call previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 378 has been to vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Is there a member vote? Does any member wish to change your vote? Mr. Clerk, please take the vote.
Ayes 92, 3 nays, 1 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 378, having received the constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most for series table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 952 by Chairman Boyd and others relative to the regulation of healthcare facilities. Mr. Speaker, Senate bill is on the desk.
Chairman Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 858.
Chairman Boyd moves substitute and form Senate Bill 858, probably seconded without objection. So ordered. Chairman Boyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 858 on third and final consideration.
Chairman Boyd moves passage of Senate Bill 858 on third and final consideration, probably seconded. Mr. Clerk, call it First Amendment.
House Health Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, is the same as Senate Amendment 2.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
House Health Committee Amendment number 2, it's the same as Senate Amendment 1.
Chairman Terry, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 2 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Chairman Boyd, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, since 2019, the Certificate of Need Reform Working Group has been meeting to recommend various reforms to the Certificate of Need program that are both strategic and methodical and reduce disruption to the industry and services to patients in Tennessee. This bill is one of those recommendations. This bill would actually consolidate the Health Facilities Commission, which functions as the Certificate of Need Board, with the Board of Licensings for Healthcare Facilities. This new entity would be called the Health Facilities Commission. Mr. Speaker, I renew my motion.
Chairman Boyd renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Grills, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move previous question.
Previous question been called. Any objection? Seeing none, we're all voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 858, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 93, no nays, 1 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 858, having received constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most for series table. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, that completes that calendar. Now pursuant to the motions made yesterday, we're at the heel of Monday's calendar. Item 35, House Bill 1231 by Representative Hemmer relative to ticket sales.
Representative Freeman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know I'm out of order, and I just want to make sure and recognize all of Caleb's family members that are watching live right now for him to hopefully present his first bill.
Such a letdown, such a letdown. Mr. Clerk. Representative Hemmer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1043.
Representative Hammer moves substitute form of Senate Bill 1043. Paul, second without objection. So ordered. Representative Hammer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1043 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hammer moves passage of Senate Bill 1043 on third and final consideration. Paul, second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Commerce Committee Amendment number 1, Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman Vaughn, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And point of order first. Are we really going to do it this time? All right. Then we're going to move to withdraw that amendment, and we're going to hear this fine legislator do his thing.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Hammer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Live music and entertainment are vital to the culture and economy of Tennessee, but consumers feel some practices in the ticket industry are unfair. This legislation addresses two big issues that impact ticket buyers: transparency in pricing and bad actors deceiving consumers with deceptive website URLs. First, the bill simplifies the online ticket purchasing process for the consumer through the transparent pricing. In other words, the first price a consumer sees when they select a ticket for purchase should be the same as the final price a consumer pays, showing all ancillary and service fees in the ticket price. No surprises during the checkout process. Additionally, this bill addresses bad actors routinely using websites and URLs featuring language or images of an artist, venue, team, or entertainment event to deceive consumers and give the false appearance of an official or legitimate ticket selling channel. This bill will ban the practice of deceptive websites and URLs by making it so no person can use a website to display a trademark or copyrighted URL or other mark or symbol without the written consent of the rights holder. We worked on this bill alongside artists, venues, and the online ticket industry to ensure that the bill was updated with the best legal language and policies to protect artists, fans, and consumers in the ticket buying process. Additionally, I'd like to publicly thank the Attorney General's office for lending their expertise and assistance with this legislation. And with that explanation, I renew my motion.
Representative Hammer renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Jernigan, you're recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to roll my comments to the hill of comments, if I could.
You just want to be rolled to the hill. I got you. I got it. Okay. That's very unique. Representative Powell, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the sponsor yield?
Representative Hammer.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Powell.
Thank you. I have a technical question about the bill. So if you buy a ticket for an event and then say daylight savings time occurs, is the ticket good for the time that you purchased it at, or is it good now for daylight savings time?
Representative Hammer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative, for your fine question. I would say your ticket would be for whenever the event is going to be held, and we probably need to confirm that with the event venue.
Representative Powell.
Follow-up question here. If you have a pet that you want to bring to the event, and then you maybe are not going to go with that person that you had originally intended to attend the event with, who gets to take the pet to the event?
Representative Hammer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I don't think I know the answer to that question, but I think you would have to look at the terms and conditions of your tickets and check with Event Venue for their pet policy.
Representative Powell.
Thank you. Are you interested in rolling that to get an answer?
Representative Hammer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, I'm not.
Representative Powell.
All right, I will yield to other comments and then let my seatmate wrap it up here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Congratulations on your first bill.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm just curious about the origins of this bill. Is it true that you're just mad because you couldn't get Taylor Swift tickets?
Representative Hammer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There have been some bad blood about this, but I don't know. I will say that there was a lot of consumers here in Tennessee, as well as across the state, that in other states that were worried about this, and a lot of that went into this ticket bill. I'd like to publicly thank my legislative assistant, Catherine Ferris. I know we all have legislative assistants who do a lot of heavy lifting for us all, but she did a lot of the research and impetus for getting this bill. And so we did a lot of conversations with various people within the ticket industry and came up with something we think is a good bill.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, he's running out of my time, Mr. Speaker. I've been told that maybe the last ticket you did purchase that you were kind of, I don't know, not satisfied with. Was that the Harry Styles concert?
Representative Hammer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, sir, I don't believe that was a concert I attended.
Representative Mitchell.
What is the last event you attended then?
Representative Hammer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know I attended a very good Bruce Springsteen concert that a very nice seatmate of mine purchased those tickets for, and so I'd like to publicly thank him for that.
Representative Mitchell.
Yeah, you are colluding with Ticketmaster, obviously. But congratulations on your first bill. Very proud of all your hard work and your diligence. And now I'll turn it over to Mr. Jernigan if the speaker shall allow.
We got one more before that. Leader Lamberth.
Well, that was a really nice back and forth. I get the distinct feeling you guys know each other. Before you were elected as a state representative, are y'all related in any way, or is there some way that you know Representative Mitchell? I just thought you might want to share that with everybody.
Representative Hammer.
Thank you, Representative. As the old saying goes, you don't choose your family, but you choose to love them.
Representative Jernigan.
Okay, so I should not have rolled my comments to the hill because all my material was ripped off. But I want to congratulate you as well. I spoke to your friends, and they both said that it was about Taylor Swift, and I really hope you get to go to that show, and maybe someone knows who that is and help him get there. Congratulations, Taylor.
Any objection to the question? Seeing none, we're voting. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1043, vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed, vote no. Has every single member voted? Does anybody wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 94, no nays, 2 present, not voting.
Senate Bill 1043 having received a constitutional majority, I hereby declare passed without objection. Most reconsider is tabled. Call up next bill, Mr. Clerk.
House Bill 1232 by Representative Hemmer and others relative to education. Mr. Speaker, Senate bills on the desk.
Representative Hammer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move to substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1231.
Representative Hammer moves substitute and conform to Senate Bill 1231, properly second without objection. So ordered. Representative Hammer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move passage of Senate Bill 1231 on third and final consideration.
Representative Hammer moves passage of Senate Bill 1231 on third and final consideration, properly second. Mr. Clerk, call First Amendment.
House Education Administration Committee Amendment number 1. Mr. Speaker, same as Senate Amendment number 1.
Chairman White, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The same as the Senate amendment, so I move to withdraw.
Without objection, amendment number 1 withdrawn. Next amendment, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Speaker, no further amendments.
Representative Hammer, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill authorizes the local Board of Education to contract with a private college or university accredited by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools Commissioned on Colleges for the college or university to maintain a training school, which are more commonly known as lab schools, for grades pre-K through 12. Currently, state law only allows public universities the opportunity to work with LEAs to operate a lab school. This bill would simply allow private universities the same opportunity to create these lab schools and the legal framework to negotiate with the LEA. Tennessee has very successful lab schools at the University of Memphis, ETSU, and at MTSU. Strengths of laboratory schools include increased performance on standardized tests, better preparation for higher education, and understanding of a college atmosphere through working with professors and students, and higher college acceptance rates. This can often be attributed to working collaboratively as an entity of a university, which creates a culture and atmosphere that promotes student interest in higher education. Additionally, lab schools create an additional benefit for employees of higher education institutions by allowing their families a high-quality education option at their place of work. And with that explanation, I renew my motion.
Representative Hammer renews his motion. Any discussion on the bill? Representative Towns.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Is this your first bill?
Representative Hammer.
No. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my second bill, likely.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor of Senate Bill 1231 vote aye when the bell rings. Those opposed vote no. Has every member voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? Mr. Clerk, take the vote.
Ayes 96, no nays.
Senate Bill 1231 having received a constitutional majority, everybody declare passed by objection. Most read series table. Representative Love.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the rules be suspended for immediate consideration of Senate Joint Resolution number 781. This is for Lacey.
Mr. Clerk, read the caption.
Senate Joint Resolution 781 by Leader Love and others, a resolution to honor the memory of Theron Ira Lewis Lacey of Nashville.
You've heard the caption. Any objections? Without objections, rules suspended. Representative Love.
I move to concur in Senate Joint Resolution number 781 and have the Davidson County delegation listed as co-prime sponsors. And Towns next.
Representative Love moves to concur in Senate Joint Resolution 781, probably second. Any objection to the question? Seeing none. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I declare concurred. The objection, most read series table. Members, we're moving towards Thursday's calendar. We can break now and come back at we can break now at 2. I see 2. I see 2. I see 2. I see 2. All right. Leader Lambert.
Oh, I get to pick.
Make the motion for 2, please.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think that was an indication that I get to choose. I believe that was an indication that I would, thank you, Mr. Speaker, I make a motion that we stand in recess until 2 o'clock today.
Without objection, we're in recess.